that doesn't really say no often, even though that'll be the third night in a row I've been down my local pub. Um, but you got to live, haven't you? And yes, so let's just read your comments. And we have Leonard Arola. So, hello, my friend, how are you? And he says, Scala Broda. And I know there's various different ways you can spell brother when it comes to Norse. So, Brudir is another one. And then you could have Broda with Brodr as well. But then King Edward says, well, I hope you don't mind me just calling you King Edward because it's just, and I love that, you're called King Edward. Perhaps, if we, ever became powerful enough as a channel, we'll grant you your lands and make you the king of where you live. And he says, I came up with the Giant Slayer tank for my rugby nickname as I can tackle people who are taller than me and run through players like a tank. Oh, right, I got you now. That makes sense. And because let's face it, there's some really strong and stocky and well-built guys that do rugby. And I don't fundamentally understand rugby, but I have watched it a little bit in the past. But because it's one of those games I don't understand, I'm not a massive rugby or sports fan. Like, I don't watch football really. I mean, if the World Cup comes along, I may watch the odd match, but generally I just wait until the final and just watch that. But I'm not a massive football fan, and I do have a local football team, and they are called the Rams, Derby County. And I used to listen to the radio all the time, but because they kept on losing, because they didn't perform very well, because we kept on going down the leagues, unlike Nottingham Forest, our rivals, who are doing tremendously well, and congratulations to them. And that says a lot from somebody from Derby congratulating Nottingham Forest, because there is a massive amount of rivalry. So I'm not a massive football or sports fan. I like a bit of snooker. I don't mind watching a bit of darts. Some of these extreme sports I quite like. And I'm a massive Formula 1 fan. You can always guarantee there's a Formula 1. I don't know if there's one this weekend. Is there one this weekend? I'll have to have a look on the TV. But I do always try to tune in and watch the highlights. Normally on YouTube, sometimes we used to do it on Channel 4. I really like Formula 1. I like to go to some actually in the future. But it's amazing what amazing massive crowds they get. 300,000 people. You can't imagine that, can you? I mean, I certainly can't imagine it. And you stand in the stands and the cars just go meow, and that's all you see, really, isn't it? But and I'm glad this year with Formula 1, I'll talk about it for a few minutes, because last year it was too dominant by Verstappen. So I'm really grateful and happy this year that actually Verstappen isn't winning. He seems to have lost that flair. His car, his Red Bull car isn't as good as it used to be. And you've got people like Norris and Piastri who are doing fantastic with McLaren. And that's great. And then, Russell's not doing too bad. It's a shame that since Lewis Hamilton moved to Ferrari, he's not doing so great yet. And I don't know whether Lewis has lost his flair and his driving ability a bit, or whether it's because he's just got a rubbish car at the moment and the Ferrari cars aren't just up to scratch. I think that's probably the case. I mean, I would actually love it if you put Alonso in a Red Bull. If the Red Bulls are performing, or put Alonso in a better car, because I'm a massive Alonso fan, because I just love that guy a bit, because in fact he's been doing it for many years. I can remember most of his career because I've been watching him from the start to to where he is now. But I think it also shows that even in your 40s you can keep driving and you can keep doing what you love. I mean, who knows? He may be the first Formula 1 driver to actually and there is a personal connection to Formula 1, which I'll tell you about in a minute, to where I live. But I think it just shows you that if you keep doing something and you've got a passion, you can keep doing it and loving what you're doing as well. And then that connection with where I live is that my house where I live in Derby was the house of Derby's only Formula 1 driver. I think it's Reg Pardy or Reg Pernod lived in this house. At some point in the past, I think maybe the 50s or the 60s. So there's that deep connection with this house and Formula 1. And I find that to be really quite amazing. My house was actually built for the Secretariat of Rolls-Royce back in 1925, and originally it was one of the first houses on this street. Although you do have a house on the corner, which goes back to the 17th or 16th century, which is an old toll house. Even though it doesn't look like it's an old building on the outside, but I know it within the inside, and I've never been in it. It's now split into two, and quite interestingly, on the far side of that toll house, and it's on the corner of the road, there's an old guy in there, and he does wood carving. One time when I was coming back from the pub, slightly drunk, I saw him in his little garage working away on some stuff, and I saw him and said hello. So I'm Andy. I'm your neighbour from up the road, because on my street, because it's so big and posh, and the houses are really massive, nobody talks to each other, and ain't that a shame that we've lost that community? And I think that's often the case in lots of places. So if you're lucky enough to live on a street or in a village and you've got community and you know your neighbours and you talk to them, and quite luckily I do have two neighbours I talk to and I see every week, and they've been a tremendous support to myself. Even though I'm a bit stubborn, I don't always listen to what they say. That's just me. I need to be less stubborn. So I do have some community, and then we have just down the bottom of the garden. There's a guy that goes around, and names begin with T, and he's a fascinating character because he wears plastic bags on his feet when he goes out, and on a few occasions you see him walking about his garden with a bin liner over his top. And I must say that's ingenious weatherproofing gear. If you don't have a rain jacket, just get a bin liner, cut two holes in the corner, one for your head, and put it on. But I think that's just very simplistic, but it's a bit odd as well. Let's have a look at your comments. So this whole live stream, so let me tell you what it's about. So it's about hanging out with you guys, and I've got no set time. So if it carries on for 90 minutes, if it carries on for 3-4 hours, I don't really mind. And I could be doing other things, but I've got other priorities in my life, which I've been reminded about by somebody I met last night, which is a whole entire story. I'm drinking tea, by the way, in a very spotty mug, and the only reason why I brought this mug is because it's big, and because I want a big cup of tea some days in the morning, and I probably already drank quite a lot of coffee today. So it's a hangout. It's going to be reading your comments. And if you've got any questions, I mean, literally, you could ask me anything. I mean, I'll have a go at answering it. I mean, maybe not some really complicated maths question, or something really, intricate about something I don't know. But I'm willing to have a shout out. And of course, I could always ask Alexa. Because I've got Alexa here. So let's go back to King Edward. So my rugby team, I've been having problems with getting a game for the second team, but I do go down to watch the first team games. So generally in rugby, you have two teams, don't you? Because not long back, I was watching a bit of there's a TV detective series. Fiasco and something else. I can't remember his name. It was an old BBC one. I saw some episodes on the YouTube, and one of them was around a rugby club, and I know they had two teams. But it's funny how in football we don't have two teams, apart from a lot of football clubs who have a male team, of course, that's dominant and is always the way, but also now have a ladies team. And I actually looked at, because I think actually ladies football is actually the genuine football, what it should be, but also the lower leagues as well. Because let's face it, when you're paying 60 million or 100 million pounds for a player in the Premiership, how can you compete if you just gone up from the Championship to the Premiership, and your club may be worth 100 million pounds, but somebody in a higher club has just spent 100 million pounds on one player? And then it's the ridiculous wages they get. Some people are getting like 100,000, 200,000 pounds a week. You can't comprehend those figures. But of course, I suppose it's a bit controversial, but as that ruined football to a certain degree, maybe so. where's it going to lead to? Are we going to get to the point one day in 20 years when we're going to have a player worth £1 billion? You know, probably the way we're going. Maybe not in 20 years. That'll probably be a little bit far-fetched and a bit more in the future. But of course, you know, rugby is a fantastic sport to watch if you're really into it. It's very physical. I definitely watched a few, because I used to be quite into rugby at one point, watching all the World Cups. And I remember one time I had a England rugby top, and I've never known what's happened to it. It disappeared in my teenage years, and never known what happened to it. Perhaps I lent it to somebody, perhaps I left it somewhere. So yeah. Then overnight, I've answered a lot of more comments. I've gone back about 8 or 9 days in the channel history answering comments. There's been a lot of comments, so I have gone around and answered more comments because it's a bit rude if I don't, but at the same time it can be a bit overwhelming when you get thousands of comments and you've got to reply to them all. So just bear with me. I will keep going back, but of course I get new comments and I've got to answer them first, so then I've got to go and search and hunt for comments I've not replied to. Yeah, so how are you all today anyway? Are you having a good day? Is it raining? What's the weather doing where you are? I think we've got some thunder coming over at some point on some heavy rain, so that may happen. And it's very windy. In a shamanic point of view, they always say that the wind is a female spirit. Certainly, if you read the book by Don John, what's his name, the Mexican guy that went into the desert and met the shamans, although I do believe those books are actually fiction and not true, because I read them. There's one book by, called Don John, and he wrote all about these books about going into Mexico and meeting the shamanic cultures, and having peyote and pretending to be not pretending, thinking he was a dog and running around on all fours and laying down on the ground and having the shaman covering him in sticks because the wind is a female element and he had to protect himself from the wind and the sticks. But I do believe those books are actually fiction. That's what I was told. Whether that's true, I think there's an element of that, but I do have quite a few books on shamanism or shamanism. I often pronounce it both ways, but I don't think there's a correct way of saying it. It can either be shamanic or shamanic, depending how you pronounce it. And of course, different cultures, different countries pronounce things differently. Like, for instance, with Eggle is pronounced so differently in the Scandinavian countries and the Icelandic countries, but this is also the same with the gods, like Thor. I mean, some cultures will go Thor and not pronounce the H. And then you got, like, in England, we call it Loki, but in, like, Sweden and Norway, it's Loki. So again, the different pronunciation of the god names is also quite fascinating, and makes you think how actually Thunar would be pronounced in the Scandinavian countries as well. Maybe it's Thunar, but it does make you think about that. So yes, and of course I don't have a Thor's hammer on today, so I best put one of them on for protection and to give me strength, because let's face it, we all need a bit of that these days. And I don't often sleep with a necklace unless it's like a leather one, something like this I would do. It's not too much of a hassle, and I must say something like this does get rather heavy on your neck after a while. And I really want to get back into silversmithing and so forth as well in the future, which I'm gradually going to set up and try to get back, or maybe go back and do a course again, because I think I need to remind myself how to silversmith. And it's okay doing things and teaching yourself these things, but some days actually doing a course is one of the best ways of actually learning that knowledge. And then King Edward says, you like the history of the Gallowglass mercenaries warriors, mainly of Norse Gael. Originally they were feared by the close combat fighting style. Well, yeah, that's a bit of a coincidence, because I was looking at a Facebook feed the other day which were talking about the Gallowglass, and it showed an illustration. you know, and the guy was in like baggy Viking trousers, a good pair of shoes, like, you know, sea boots, so they've got the higher level up top. He had a long tunic with a gambeson and a long mail shirt down to the sleeve. He had a good helmet. He had a chainmail coif, a sword, and he had a Dane axe, and I think he had a shield. And I thought to myself, well, how similar they are to the Huskarls when you think about it. And if you got, and I suppose there is a difference because, of course, later in the 13th century, you had things like, falchions, for instance, which is the later development of the Langsacks fundamentally. So it just made it a bit shorter. Well, sometimes they can be quite long as well, but more wider, more material, more metal, and generally more brutal. And I do actually have a falchion. It's one of those very few items I've not gone too much into detail on the channel, and there's not many videos. If you go look at all the videos, you won't find me often holding it. On a few odd occasions, I did take it into battle as a Viking, even though I knew it was historically wrong. But I just liked the feel of it, and it was cheap. It was only £15. It was handmade. Somebody did a wonderful job making it, and I thought to myself, that's a steal, and I don't really need it, but I bought it because it was cheap and it was well made. So if I'm wearing one of my Thor's hammers with the leather thong, I tend to wear that in bed, but these ones are a little bit heavy, and I can just feel them, around my neck a bit more. So I don't want to sleep and either stretch these out or damage them in my sleep. So I tend to just go over to one with a leather thong, which I don't have at the moment. I've just got a axe pendant, and I do love these axe pendants. And again, very old symbolism, and it's funny how it's got a flat bottom and it's not sharp. So is that a reflection of modern re-enactorism? But then again, I've seen lots of these originals with the same design and shape. And at some point, I'm definitely going to get into lost wax casting, and we'll start casting a few of these. And I can always remember Eggle talking about the fact that they used a lot of pewter back in the day, and also lead, because it was a cheaper form of material, and those would be like the little trinkets they would give to the women and so forth. If you try, as a Viking, to charm a woman into bed, you may go and give her a bit of cheap jewellery, but save your silver for yourself. Yeah, so things don't change, do they? But yes, I think definitely doing a video on the Gallo class mercenaries, warriors, would be quite fascinating. And of course, gradually, as we invest in more equipment throughout the next couple of years, we'll build up those impressions, and we'll definitely go into the into the 11th and the 12th and the 13th century. And if my friend Jim does come and become a host, maybe a guest host, maybe a permanent host, and he dons his armour and does a bit of combat with me, and of course if the channel blows up, if I could give him a job out of it, I would do, because you'd like Jim. And the thing about me and Jim is, or Jamie or Jay, he tends to change his name a lot, so now it's Jim again. We have that same connection that me and Eggle had, and you'll just see two, and at some point we'll do this. You'll just see us both on a live stream, and it'll just be like the connection, because we've known each other for so long. And I love the guy to bits, because even though I've not seen him for 8 years, but when I went and saw him a week last Friday, it was like 8 years hasn't gone past. It was like I saw him the week before, and that's a sign of a really good friendship. And of course, whenever you lose connection with somebody through life struggles and problems, whatever you may be going through, you always get that bit of nervousness about saying, well, I've not spoken to you for 8 years, how will you react, would it be the same? But it was just like things have never changed. And he often uses the phrase shits and giggles, which somebody left in a comment, which always makes me laugh, because it always makes me think of Jim. And I think at the moment he may be there's a reenactment weekend going on this weekend down in Worcester. It's the Worcester reenactment multi-period event. So my plan definitely try next year to go to that, and we'll go around and because I'll be with the American Civil War Society most probably. But I'll definitely go around with my camera film me a few things, do a video tour, and take you guys on the adventure with me. And as I got a new mobile contract with EE, I've got unlimited data when it comes to Wi-Fi. So in theory as well, if we can get a Wi-Fi signal, we could do a live stream from camp. So those would be some of the things I want to develop and bring to the channel. Yeah. Then Leonard, or Roller, says lots of animalism from my parents' culture. Well, again, it's the animal symbolism in the early jewellery. It's just fascinating, and all the integral designs. It's just truly awesome stuff, and that's a whole entire subject on its own. And of course, as the time developed and things got, history moved on, those sort of things kind of got died out to a certain degree. And then King Edward says, I wear a Thor's hammer, Loki's pendant, and a Viking axe pendant jewellery all the time. Well, I do whenever I go out. If I'm going out, 99% of the time, unless I can't find them, if I put them down in my house, I can lose stuff because I've got too much stuff and I need to deal with it, really. I mean, I've got a lot of nice things, but I've also got things I don't need in my life. I need to, declutter. But that's the job for another day. But I am trying to deal with it because, as a friend of mine pointed out, a new friend, she says, yeah, you need to sort this out because you've got a lovely house and you just cluttered it all up and you need to get your act together. And I do. I concentrate so much on the YouTube and the content that some days I just forget about other things like doing my garden, working and getting rid of the brambles. So I need to really, try to find that balance. And of course, I mean, and there's no excuse for that. There really isn't. But most of my life I've lived with somebody in the sense of whether it's my parents or whether, well, generally my parents, because I never really moved out of my parents' house because it's a big house, and why would you? So it's only the last since my dad died I've ever actually lived on my own. And I know it's been two years now coming up. I'm still fundamentally getting used to that aspect of living on my own. But I like my own company, even though when my dad was ill and he lived downstairs, I lived upstairs, which I generally do. It was very much like I was on my own a lot. Then I just had to go down and keep checking on my dad, which I was up and down the stairs, no wonder the carpet's worn out. But that's another story. And then Leonard says, exactly. And then King Edward says, just imagine having an army with Galloglass mercenaries and Viking berserkers. Well, if you had the Galloglass as the main body of troops and then the berserkers, the shock troops, which as Eggle used to say, they're very much like shock troops. And if you take the formations like the Zulus, where you form like the horns of the cow and you have the main body of troops moving forward, and then you have the the berserkers that go around the edge and circle the enemy, then and if we had a bit of cavalry to that and a bit of horse, even better, I think. And of course, unlike the Vikings TV show, they did not have chariots, but I suppose somehow they had to explain how what's his name, I forget now, the one that couldn't walk. It'll come back to me in a minute. I hate it when I can't remember something. Well, I don't hate it, but my brain freezes, and I know it's in there. But of course, they didn't have chariots, and I thought that was a bit stupid of the programme. They should have just put him on a horse like they would have done. But yeah, that would be quite fierce, really, wouldn't it? And if you could time travel a Viking or army with that kind of a structure to try and fight the Romans. We had an interesting comment the other day saying that the Vikings would never win against the Romans because the Romans were far more organised, but also militarily far more advanced. Whether that's true, I think it's probably to a certain degree. Let's face it. I mean, the amount of machinery and attack weapons they had, and ballistas and stuff like that, and so the Romans were fundamentally very well advanced for the age. But that's a whole entire story, as we often say. then Leonard says, "Yay! Road trip and historical explorations at hand. Thanks for your internet provider." Yeah, that'll be coming in the future, but probably won't be this year. I'm going to try at some point to start travelling, and I was going to film a 10,000 video thing for doing two locations and a bonus location, but because we had like 1,200 people joining a week, it's kind of like we're nearly at 11,000 now, so maybe I have to do that for 15,000 and go and have it in hand. And if I get my act together, I may invite Ellie, my friend, or Shine Your Light, as you see on the channel, to come and join me on that adventure, because I know she loves adventures, and she's always very nice to me, and you know, she's become a good friend, and I love that. And she keeps reminding me that I've got to have more integrity, and when it comes to my romantic situation, because I kind of feel like talking about, but you know, at the same time, I'm not allowed to talk about it. But so you know, it's a love, and romance, but that's a whole entire story, and I do, you know, yeah. I'm just trying not to be negative about the situation, even though I'm in an impossible situation, and you know, but we'll move on from that from now on. You know, perhaps that should be a tell-all live stream where I just pour it all out. But then again, maybe not the wisest of ideas. Then we have, you know, and of course, if any of you guys, if you know, King Edward, if you want the blue spanner, if you know, Leonard, Roller, if you want the blue spanner, do let me know in the comments, because you guys have been around, and you know, and certainly we do need people with the blue spanner, especially when we get a lot bigger and we have large live streams. But you know, do let me know if you ever want to be awarded the blue spanner. So we have a comment here from one of our moderators and a very good friend of the channel, somebody that I know on Facebook, and I love you to bits, Sam, because you're a wonderful human being, and always enjoy your little chats and watching your little videos when I get a chance. Oh yes, there, somebody's reminding me, Ivor the Boneless, and it was in there, thank you, King Edward. And it says, "Made it, man, been busy making arrowheads, got a new forge for Father's Day." Oh, that's excellent. That's marvellous. You can't be, you know, getting a new forge. And let's face it, you know, new forges can cost a lot of money. So yes, looking forward to seeing that on one of your videos. Of course, I've still got to sort out the forge I brought down from my workshop, which is a 19th century one. There's a bit of work needed doing to it, but it works fundamentally so. And I do have a bit of charcoal and a bit of coal down the shed. But I just got other things I need to be working on as well. Yes, and of course Ivor the Boneless, fascinating character. There's a few good documentaries about Ivor the Boneless where they speculate what was wrong with him, whether he was like, you know, whether he had, you know, a spinal problem, whether he had brittle bones disease, whether, you know, he was, you know, he couldn't walk. And of course, a lot of that speculation, and we don't fundamentally know what was wrong with Ivor the Boneless. But it's a fascinating name as well, because if it's Ivor the Boneless, you know, but yeah, you know, you don't not have bones, do you? So he must have had bones, but his bones mustn't have walked. So perhaps he couldn't walk. But he could. But certainly he never used a chariot like in the Vikings TV show. And I really do dislike it when shows take these things to the stupid element like that. Because when you saw the shield wall, when he was driving in front of it in his chariot, I thought, oh good God, you know, we've gone down this road of stupidity. You just put him on a damn horse, for God's sake. It's authentic, not in a blooming chariot. They didn't have chariots. And I could do a big rant about it. And it's a bit like how they changed the Saxon shield, so they had a different design even though they should have been round. I think the Saxon shields were rectangular, and that was wrong. And why is it in these Viking TV shows and like the Last Kingdom, not many of them wear helmets? I mean, what's all that about? A lot of people had helmets, you know. just didn't have helmets with horns on. I suppose I could have gone down that route. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, happy Father's Day to any of you guys. It's not long been. Of course, it always reminds me of my dad, but he's in a better place now because he's no longer in pain, so that's good. And do miss him. Yeah, and then Runic Crusader also says Ivor the Boneless. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think Egg talked. I think we talked about him in a vlog series, which I'm thinking about re-editing, as I said before, and then making it into a podcast, and then go through it over, a certain amount of months. We publish them all, and then restart the vlog series. As is one of my aims and plans, because I think the vlog series was a great way for us to sit down and talk about different things, and we certainly have a lot of good content from those vlog series, but some of them were like 50 minutes or an hour long, and we did quite a few. It's just unfortunate Eggle wasn't massively organised to come down every week, or we would have got a lot more filming, but that's the way it goes, and I'm happy with that, because I'm so glad we got what we did get out of Eggle and what we did film, because his content was really good, and it will pass the test of time. And then Sam says, I know what you mean, because then everybody thinks that, oh yeah, they all had chariots, they all wore horns on their helmets. Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised AI hasn't made a video yet for Dave the Cat where he's in a chariot. I mean, I've got to figure out how to actually program those stories and not have Dave changing into a human at 1 minute and then appearing as a cat the next minute and then appearing as a different coloured cat the second after that. So certainly when it comes to the app I use to make those Dave the Cat videos, which I've not made any recently, it needs to improve. And of course, and it makes you think, because I was talking to AI yesterday about, will artificial intelligence ever dream? Will you ever develop a consciousness like we have? And will that come when we have AGI? And I thought that was quite an amazing thought process, and I had a good chat with ChatGPT about it. And it does save me a lot of time, and of course it still gets things wrong, and it's still not as good as it used to be. At the moment, when I make the thumbnails in ChatGPT, it doesn't make them wide enough, and I'm getting a bit of a gap at the edge. And then if I use Gemini to make a thumbnail, sometimes it will put text, lettering and words in the thumbnail. And then the next time you do it, it doesn't, and it will say, no, I don't do text in thumbnails. It's not in my programming. But you made one yesterday or an hour ago, and I share that picture and said, I've not made this. I don't do text in thumbnails. So of course, all these things need to develop, but of course we're in that early stage of AI. But you imagine where it was 3-4 years ago, it's already pretty incredible. And the fact you can have a conversation. And then I was thinking, about somehow maybe incorporating Gemini into some of the videos, because I think that would be quite interesting to get AI's perspective on the history side of things. I don't know what you think about that. I know you can do it. You can use Gemini videos, and of course I don't know whether the voice would pick up on camera. I think it would do. I'll have to do it indoors. But how would you feel about seeing me do a video talking about, let's say, the Vikings, and having a chat and a conversation with Gemini about it? Because it's going to at some point keep repeating itself, because it does that. Yeah, and then Sam says, one thing that bugs the crap out of me is people that are always like, oh yeah, you named your daughter from the Vikings show, and I've always had to tell them, no, I watched it long before the show. Well, of course so, because fundamentally that's all that some people know exists, is the Vikings and the Last Kingdom, although the Viking show is probably much bigger and larger than the Last Kingdom. And on the one hand, we've got to thank those programs because they are spreading the word about Viking and Norse culture, but just doing it in a way which is not fundamentally authentic. But that's Hollywood for you. And you do often see in the comments where people say, "Oh, I really love there'll be a really authentic, proper show about the Vikings, which is really good and authentic and don't get things wrong and get the history right." And of course, we've not got to that stage in film production and television production because it's Hollywood. And but one day we may get there. We may get that ultimate program, a drama series on the Vikings, which is actually bang on authentic. Because there's no excuse really, is there? Because the amount of money they spend on these programs, there's certainly no excuse when it comes to them getting things right. And then we have a comment here from my friend Ellie. Shine your light and greetings and glad tidings all. I'm trying to get away from saying good morning, even though it always reminds me of The Hobbit and Gandalf going up to, not Frodo, wait a minute. Again, I'm getting brain freeze because I'm tired and not had enough sleep. And I stayed up all night with some strange mad woman. It's another story, I may tell about that in a minute. Friends, of course, nothing happened. Bilbo, yeah. Of course, if you never seen or never heard the song by Leonard Nimoy, there's a song he wrote called Bilbo Baggins, or maybe it's called Bilbo. But if you ever on YouTube, just type in Leonard Nimoy and Bilbo and listen to that song. It's really, really good. And of course, he was a really good singer, actually, surprisingly. Leonard Nimoy, and fascinating character. And of course, I'm a massive Star Trek fan. In fact, not long back, I watched the one where they went back in Earth in time to save the whales. Only because it was randomly on Prime. And I've seen it, God knows how many times I've watched that film. I can't remember the name of it. It'll come back to me. It's in my head somewhere. But I actually really do love that film, and I've probably seen it 30 to 50 times, and no doubt in the next year or two I'll probably watch it again. Because I watched quite a few of the Generation films recently, and I really do fancy, probably over winter time, subscribing to Paramount and just rewatching Deep Space Nine, which is one of my favourite Star Trek series, and Voyager. That was a good one as well. And I didn't really watch Generations when it came out too much, and I have watched recently quite a few of the Generations, with Picard, of course, and Wolf and all the crew. And of course, there's also a local connection with Star Trek, because where I used to work in Spondon, there's two Greek brothers that own a chippy, and their sister is the telepath woman in Generations, who is, again, can't remember the name. And then Shine Your Light says, "Ooh, you've not heard of clones, them braggy." Well, yes, we mean clones, and cloning is something quite fascinating. Of course, within the world of conspiracy, they say that they've been cloning human beings for a while. And in fact, there was a guy on YouTube who was a whistleblower who talked about the fact that he was working in cloning factories where there was cloning famous people, and they had the ability to do that because, you think about cloning back in the 90s when they had the ability to clone a sheep. If they're publicly telling you that in the public domain that they can clone a sheep, then fundamentally so in the private secret domain of the world, they could probably clone a human being. And this individual was saying, in America and various other places in the world, they've got these cloning factories where they can clone people. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. And then there's some more weird speculation about the fact that they could download your subconsciousness in your sleep and put it into a clone, which was the other aspect of it. And then they were saying that they're using these factories also to generate and make popular music, which is a bit far-fetched, and I can't remember the name of the guy. And I can't remember what channel I saw it on. It was quite big a few years back, because it all went all over the internet and it was quite sensational. But of course, they tell a lot of truth, and then they tell a lot of lies and smoke and mirrors to confuse so you don't know the truth because of the way they control information. And of course, that could all be rubbish. But of course, how do we know? And then Shiny Light says words are spells. Well, they very much are. Because let's face it, a prayer is fundamentally a spell. And then King Edward says another thing to mention is the Islamic ring found in the Viking grave, where people say that the Vikings converted to Islam, and you have other people saying they got the ring from trading. Well, I can always remember Eggle talking about this, because he would say that if the Vikings were going to Christian lands, they would hide away their crosses and get out a Christian cross and wear that, and then as soon as they're back on the longship and going back to Scandinavia, out come your Thor's hammers, and they would, they'll hide Thor's hammers, and then they would wear a cross. But he also said the same thing about when there was trading in the Islamic countries, that some of the Norse would hide away their Thor's hammers and wear some kind of symbolism or necklace with an Islamic context or jewellery, and even to the point where they would take on an Islamic name. Of course, how much of that is speculation I couldn't fundamentally tell you, but it kind of, to a certain degree, makes sense, and we certainly know that's true when it came to the Vikings going to the Christian countries, when it came to trading, that did happen. But then again, I'd imagine the Norse were just like us today, us modern Norse warriors. We have a lot of pride. We have a lot of pride of who we are and where we come from. So why would you hide your Thor's hammer? But of course, if you're, let's say, a Viking trader, you're living in the Danelaw, and you got to go down to Wessex to do some trading, to buy some whatever you're buying, it would fundamentally make sense to hide away your Thor's hammer and just get a Christian cross out, because you're not going to be attacked, but you're not going to be in a situation where people are going to say, oh, this guy's a Norse warrior, we're going to have him. And could you really, apart from the symbolism they wore, can you tell fundamentally the difference between a Norse warrior and an Anglo-Saxon warrior? Well, not fundamentally so. There would be probably slight differences in hairstyles maybe, or maybe the fact that the Saxons shaved more and were more known for having big moustaches like Eggle, if you look at the Bayeux Tapestry. But of course, a lot of that's speculation, but if we don't speculate, we can't talk about it, and if we don't talk about it, we can't get this whole opinion and this whole thought process of actually saying, yeah, that could be fundamentally true. But of course, and then you read one book, it will say, yeah, actually that was a practice, they did do that. Then you read another book on the Vikings and it will say, no, that's not a thing. And then some of the older books from the 70s and 80s will say that, but then more modern books have taken the interpretation and saying, well, no, that isn't practice, there's no fundamental evidence for it. Unless you get really into detail when it comes to reading any, letters that survived, or any, documented, paperwork, or any, illustrations which show that. It's very hard to say, because it's not like the modern world where we record everything and everything's saved for posterity to a certain degree. Let's face it, everything you type into your phone is saved in your phone memory. It's there somewhere. And my tea is going cold. But I don't mind cold tea. Or cold coffee, to be fair. And then Shiny Light says, oh yes, cheer me dears. Tea up. Oh yes, tea up indeed. A good cup of tea. And then Sam says, when my daughter was 2 years old, she could hum, sing and open the theme to Voyager. Yeah, and I really love the Voyager series. I think, Catherine Janeway, captain, the captain of the ship, was just such a strong and dominant woman figure. And of course, Star Trek was very forward-thinking in having these women in these important roles in Star Trek, and because it's and then also you're having black people in the TV shows like Captain Sisko, and he's a fantastic character, and like I said, Deep Space Nine is probably my favourite one, and I watched a very good documentary about Deep Space Nine very recently on YouTube, and that was a fascinating 90 minutes. And I would love to live in that Star Trek universe. And if if I was really into it, I'd even get a Star Trek uniform and become a Trekkie, because I actually loved the Star Trek culture. And I've read quite a few books, by Gene Roddenberry. I've read his biography, fascinating individual, and he was very ahead of his time, because and it's a great thing to aim for when it comes to humanity, because if we could end up in 100 years time when we're all departed from this world because we've had our lives in this, or at least this life, maybe we'll come back as somebody else, you never know. But if we can end up in that world, in that situation where we have Star Trek, I think that will be awesome for humanity, because then we can go into the stars and boldly go where no man has been before and explore. Because let's face it, as human beings, we are explorers. We have that massive urge. Because of the modern world we live in, we have lost that connection when it comes to having that space to explore. There's no Wild West anymore, really. There's little adventure in life, and sometimes I feel that's a massive gap in my life, because I love to go adventuring. And yes, you can go adventuring and look for new places and go to new ruins and look at castles and so forth, and go for a walk in the wood and discover things. But there's no Wild West. Would you really want to live in the Wild West? But let's face it, unless you're good at putting your gun out and shooting people fast, you wouldn't survive a gunfight, would you? But yeah, and so there's no medieval times anymore, even though we live it in the modern world, but we don't live it like the same sense, because we're modern Norse pagans and we're not Norse pagans as they used to be. And then Shiny Light says that's AI. And then Shiny Light says they have been cloning for eons. Yeah, I expect that's fundamentally true, because there was these conspiracies about various people in power, like Obama or the late Queen being cloned, and people used to make videos saying, well, look at the Queen here, and then look at the Queen 5 years ago, she looks different, but of course, how do we know? Because they don't tell us such things, and we live in a world of secrecy and forbidden history, forbidden medicine, everything. There's so much forbidden stuff in the world, because they don't want us to know, because if we know, we have the power, and as we do have the power because we are the people. But of course, yeah. And then Sam says, have you seen where they've cloned the dire wolf here in America and made a woolly mice and the woolly mammoth DNA? I've definitely heard about the dire wolf, and I think that's quite fascinating. And I'm sure we're going to get to the stage where we could bring back the woolly mammoth. I think that would be pretty awesome. Where would we put them? Where would they go? I don't know. And then do we want dire wolves running about the countryside? Let's face it, it's bad enough with wolves. And dire wolves are much larger. I mean, well, why not bring back the saber-toothed tiger? That'll make life more interesting. I mean, let's face it, I don't want to really fight one of them. Because they're pretty fishes and they've got big teeth. But it's fascinating, though, that we could bring back these creatures. And certainly, I would love to see a woolly mammoth. Could we ever bring back dinosaurs like Jurassic Park and have an island where there's dinosaurs? That could fundamentally become reality. But And then Leonardo Roller says, "Oh please, I would love a new leather back. Take my money." Well, yeah, I mean, my back does play up, and certainly if I'm wearing my mail, my back aches the next day. But that's life. That's mainly because I got hit by a massive lorry, and my back's never quite been the same since. And ever since I got hit by that lorry, whenever I do that with my neck, I can hear it grinding. That never happened before. And then Shiny Light says, very astute, the very crafty blighters. Well, they are indeed, because of course that's how they control things. And then Shiny Light says, the book burning did away with a lot of his story. They have been getting rid of old historical history books for years. AI is starting to only give you answers that go with the known narrative now. Well, of course so, because the people in charge of the world control AI because they're the people with the power. And that's fundamentally true, and which is one of the reasons why I actually love old books, because there's a lot of hidden knowledge in those books. But it's a disgraceful and terrible thing that we've had times in our past where we burn books. I mean, I was in one of the Wetherspoons the other day, and then they got like display bookshelves, and they'd gone and cut books in half and glued them to the wall. I mean, what's all that about? Using a book as a display item and cutting it in half. I mean, utterly disgraceful. I mean, a book is knowledge and should be treated as such and should be respected. And of course, my friend Shiny Light often gives me very nice books. And in fact, some of the books she gave me are just behind the helmet there the other day. And then Shiny Light says, very basic answers. Well, very true indeed. And then Shiny Light says, Yeti, werewolf. Well, yeah, I mean, if they find enough evidence of Yeti DNA, although the Yeti is probably still around, but they could fundamentally make the Yeti. I mean, it will probably, Bigfoot would make a really good super soldier, wouldn't it? If you could control it somehow. But that's a whole entire story. And I don't know what I want to be, a Bigfoot or a werewolf. Would he be a werewolf or would he be a vampire? Let me know in the comments. I think, I don't know. I think some days I think, being a vampire would be quite cool. You go around, they get the sort of blood of virgin, or so to say. But then again, I think I prefer to be a werewolf, to be fair, because I like the ability of turning myself into a wolf, running wild, eating a lot of chickens, and then coming back home again. Yeah. And certainly back in the past, if you go on the community page, you will see some of these funny community polls where I did like, would you prefer to be a clown or would you prefer to be, and I've created a lot of these funny little polls like that. Perhaps I should bring back some of these funny polls and do some more. And then Sam says, werewolf all day. Yeah, I think I agree with you. And if you've never seen the American Werewolf in London film, that's a brilliant film back from the 1980s. And, and then I love the song by Warren Zevon, Werewolf to London. Werewolf to London again. It talks about having a Chinese. That's a lovely song, that. And I do love a bit of Warren Zevon, or Zevon, how you pronounce it, if you've never heard of him. And I'm spilling tea down my mouth. I'm drinking too fast. So yeah, and then Shiny Light says they did. I'm going to sit back a bit because leaning forward is slightly stretching my back out. Oh yes. So I had a bit of an adventure last night. I think I'm going to talk about that now. I'll probably get told off by Shiny Light at some point. In real life, not on the live stream, or maybe on the live stream too. So I went out last night. I met this guy who's a content creator or wants to get into it. So I met up with him for about an hour. And I did see your message saying you're not going out last night pillaging, which I don't blame you because I was so warm yesterday. And by the time I walked back, through the park, it was dark, but there's nobody about, not many people. Just the usual crowd enjoying themselves, having a smoke. Some people were. There's some people having a barbecue. And I thought, well, it's about 10:30. I thought, I'm just nipping to the Abbey. So I spent about an hour talking to this guy because he didn't have long. And we just talked about maybe making some content together, or me just giving him some advice because he's starting out on YouTube. And then I'll tell you a funny story, because I put out a couple of feedy things on Reddit, on the local Derby Reddit page. I put one out 3 weeks back to say, looking at making new friends, anybody into content creating. And I've had about 3 people contact me. In fact, I need to check Reddit again because I made another one yesterday and I put another one out. I thought I'd try again. Somebody came forward and said, well, if you're ever interested in making and 2 initials, OF, content, well, let me know. And I thought, well, what's OF content? I had to Google it. I had to go to AI. So, what is OF content? It's OnlyFans. I thought, oh no, I'm not into that. So I sent them a quick message back saying, no, I'm all right, thank you. I'm not into making OnlyFans content because I like to keep my integrity, and I'm not into that really. You know, if you're into that, fair enough. I mean, yeah, I can imagine it's mainly women dominated. So I thought, well, you know, so I did that. I managed to get the bus, because I'm terrible at getting buses. I mean, the amount of times I've left my house, you know, thinking, right, I got 7 minutes to catch the bus. I cross the road, I cross the next road, and just as I cross the road, the bus goes past. I think, oh, bloody hell, the amount of times I've missed the bus. You know, it's been 2 minutes early. Or I just get to the pavement, and I got another 100 yards to go, and the bus goes past. Even to the point where, you know, you try to run to the bus stop and put your hand out, and sometimes they don't stop. You know, the amount of times I've missed buses in my past is unbelievable. I must have real bad luck with getting on buses. And to be fair, I prefer not to get in a bus. If I had the time, I prefer to walk down, because I love a good walk. You can have a look round at things, you can have a good think on the way down, and quite luckily where I walk into Derby, it's really nice. It's a lovely park. It was a part of an old country estate from the Derby Abbey big manor house. It's no longer around because they knocked it down in the 1950s. You know, another terrible thing that happened to Derby. They could have saved it and had a bit of really decent history on the park. So I walked down. I met him for about an hour. And to be truthful, I can't remember his name at the moment. And then I thought, well, you know, it was about 10:15. I thought, well, or maybe 10 o'clock. Yeah, I was only there about 45 minutes with him, because he had to go home, and he gave me a lift back up the A6 and dropped me off in Derby Abbey. And I thought, well, I'll go for a quick shandy, because I was really thirsty and I was really hot. And because my two friends, Martin and Maria, had taken over my pub, I just want to show them a bit of loyalty and give them a bit of my custom. And actually, as Martin said, you know, Andy, he said, you need to get yourself out a bit more. You know, you can't just lock yourself in your house all the time. You need to come out and have a social life. And I really appreciate that honesty, and I do, because I can lock myself away. And yeah, and that's not fundamentally good for it. Even though I love my own company, but just now and again, I will get back to your comments in a minute. I just, you know, feel like I need to, you know, just stay in and do what I'm doing, because I just get lost in time, and then days go past, and you know, it can be like a whole week can pass, and some days I don't see people. So I do try to go out and see my neighbours and have a cup of tea with them. Very rarely do I invite them round to my house, because it's a bit of a mess and I need to sort it out a bit more, which I'm trying to do. I did some hoovering earlier. I did hoover the floor, and I thrown some more things out. So I keep working on that. I even cleaned my bin the other day, or this morning, with a hose pipe. That's progress in my life. So I went out, and this guy, and I can't remember his name, I think it may be Dean or something like that, or Dave. Perhaps he's named after a cat. You know, he wants to do music videos, because he's a musician, but he wants to do paranormal content. And he said, you know, would he be interested in just doing a few videos with him, and he'll put them on his channel, and what I record can come on this channel, and we'll just go around Derby and just do some, you know, because he's very sceptical, and he thinks, well, I'm the opposite of that. I'm fundamentally a believer, but I also have the element of science behind it, because I think it's important to have that. So we had a bit of a chat about that. You know, he dropped me back in his car. Can't remember what car it was. I think it was a Volkswagen. And then I went down to my local pub, and I think I got there about 10:15 last night. I had a lovely pint of shandy, because I was so thirsty. I just didn't want a pint of, and they got no bitter on it. It's lager. I'm not a lager drinker really, but they got no bitter at the moment until they get served. So I'd say 2 nights in a row I've been down the Abbey. And then I got down there, and as soon as I started walking through, some woman said, "Oh, that's a colourful shirt you're wearing," because I was wearing a nice t-shirt and a very colourful shirt. Because when I go out, I like to dress up. I like to look colourful. Because that's the way I am. I'm not embarrassed most of the time, not to wear what I want to wear. I maybe wouldn't go out in my cowboy hat, because I'm a bit conscious about that, because that really is quite an alarming thing for people to see. So I said, oh yeah, because she kind of said, oh, that shirt matches that woman's dress. And I thought, well, that woman's got good. I said to her, that woman's got good clothes sense, then, hasn't she? And then I went in the pub. And then for the first time, I met Martin's son, who's 6'7", and he's only about 18, 17. He's 17, and he's a really nice lad, I must say. And he's massively into bodybuilding and weightlifting, and apparently he can bench press 160 kilos. And I don't know whether that's a lot. I assume it is. So we had a bit of a chat about content, and then I went outside because it was a bit warm, and I got talking to this woman who talked about my shirt. Her name was Jolene, and she's very much a spiritual person, and she said, oh, I've got ADHD, she says, and I said, well, I think I may have that, and after about 5 minutes of talking to me, she said, no, you've definitely got ADHD, I can tell straight away, and then we just had a good night, and then just led to one thing to another. But I don't want to go too much into the details, but I had a good night, and then I did loads of comments because I wasn't tired when I got back in. So I answered lots of comments. I've added some more videos, and then some nights I just stay awake and I just do things, and then before I know it, it's like 6 in the morning, and I think, oh well, I like to sleep when it's dark. So I thought, oh, I'm still not tired. So by the time I got tired, it was midday. That's when I went to bed for about 4 hours, 3.5 hours. But yeah, I did have a very fun night last night, and she's actually a content creator herself, but she does like topless videos, and then asked me to go and film some of them with her. It's a kind of partly declined, and I said, well, that's not my cup of tea really, but if you really need a hand or some advice, I'm more than happy to give you advice. Well, anyway, let's go back to your comments. And then Shiny Light says, make them. And then, we have a comment from Don Julio. Wouldn't it be better to wait to fall to pillage? Well, when I mean pillage, I just mean going out and raiding a load of bins and to do dumpster diving. That's what Shiny Light calls it. It's the modern equivalent of being a Viking, going to raid shop bins and ended up with nice things, and I'm trying to teach myself to take less because I don't need much more stuff in my life. I need to get rid of some things. Perhaps every time I get something, I should throw something away. But that doesn't always fundamentally work with me. And when I brought back last night, when I came back to have a drink with this random stranger, she said, well, you got too much stuff in your house, and she gave me a bollocking and said, you need to sort your house out. And even to the point where she said, well, I'm going to come round and hope you sort your house out and just, tidy up a bit. No, not tidy up, but just get rid of some of the things, but it's accumulated. And of course, I've inherited lots of things from different relatives that's accumulated and not dealt with yet. And then, I got some things from another friend of mine who passed away a few years back, which I've never really, I just boxed up, and I never really dealt with that either. Yeah. And then Shiny Light says, waiting for fall to pillage, you have to go often. Well, you do if you want to get the good stuff and go every week, fundamentally so. And then he says, you miss a lot of goodies. Well, I do, but I also got to restrain myself and take the goodies and not the baddies. But I did do quite well last time, even though we did get quite a bit of stuff, didn't we? And then Don Julio says, full stocks at the Priory and all those tithers they've been collecting all summer. And then Shiny Light says, haven't they not long seen a megalodon recently on deeper underwater footage? Well, there are a few interesting videos which speculate that megalodons may still be around, and there may be some evidence for that. It'll be pretty shocking, wouldn't it, if they are around? But then again, I would have thought there'd be more evidence and more accounts of sailors seeing them, unless they are actually just staying deep in the ocean and they're just very wise and don't want to be seen by humans. and then she corrects the spelling, Megalodon. And of course, I've not seen the Meg 2 yet. I've seen the Meg 1, that was a fantastic film. I've not seen Meg 2 yet. I'm kind of waiting for it to eventually appear for free on Amazon. But I quite, with Jason Statham, I quite fancy seeing that film. Because, I really quite enjoy watching the film Jaws. No doubt the first one is the best one. And after that, they get a little bit ropey, don't they? Jaws 2, Jaws 3, and then Jaws 4 is just crazy. But it does have Michael Caine in it. But again, if you've never read the book Jaws, you'll find that the ending in the original book compared to the ending in the movie is completely different and more accurate to actually what happens in nature. Well, I don't want to give any spoilers and ruin the book for you. So you have to go and buy the book and read the book, and then at the end you're going to be going, oh by the gods, I didn't realise that in actually the book it's completely different to the movie. But then again, they had to end the movie the way it did, because if they did end it in the same sense that Peter Benchley actually wrote the book, it would have been not so good an ending of the movie. So certainly within the context of the film itself, it's got the perfect ending. But so I'm glad they didn't keep to the book. And then Leonardo Roller says, yeah, raiding. Of course, yeah, dumpster diving is the modern equivalent of raiding. It's free stuff, why not? And if we all did it, if we all went out and raided the bins, then maybe the charities and maybe the shops wouldn't throw so much stuff away in the first place and actually be responsible for what they throw in the bin. And then Shiny Light says, does she think you've got good breast braggy? Don't know about that. So I'm going to say no more. And then Shiny Light says sorry and 3 laughing emojis. And she had a little doggy as well called Mr. Pops. Lovely little doggy. I'm not a doggy person though, to be fair. And then Don Julio says, we know more about space than the very deep ocean and what it holds. You just missed that ocean, but I'll put it in there for you. Well, we do know more about space than what's in the ocean, and it's amazing how much of the ocean we've not actually explored, or even mapped. And of course, the further down we go in the ocean, the more pressure there is from the water all around you. So that's also pretty incredible when you think about the amount of pressure. Then King Edward says, I like to think that the Ruari, the turbulent made the Megalodon go extinct when the stormy afternoon chasing a Spanish treasure ship in the Atlantic Ocean. And then Don Julio says, thank you. Well, you're welcome. Then Shiny Light says, it's the great free food. Yes, and I've been eating some of that lovely cake we found a few weeks back, and I must say, that's really nice. It begins with an M, but I can't remember the name of it because it's not that important to my life. But I've just been eating it, it's quite nice. And it's nice, I've been eating a few free crisps, that's quite nice. Not found any cheese recently. I drank that milk we found, I got some free milk. I've still got loads of free cobs and burgers. I've got 2 packs of burgers left in my freezer, so they'll be at some point. And then Leonardo Roda says, way less waste and it's fun. One of the favourite places is a junkyard. Oh yeah, I mean, amazing what people throw away or what people throw away in skips. Because they always say, the old saying is, one person's rubbish is another person's treasure. And that is so fundamentally true, isn't it? I'm drinking orange juice now. Because it's so blooming warm. And then we have another comment from Leonard Roller. It says, way less waste. Oh, no, I've read that one already. I'm repeating myself then. Yeah, so if you've got any questions, anything you want to ask, yeah, let me know. What are you drinking as you watch this live stream. I do love orange juice. I do love that. That's gorgeous. And I can forget to drink water some days. I've got to drink more water and maybe not have so much orange juice in it. There's nothing worse than being dehydrated and having a headache for it. But such is life. And then Don Julio says, with what? Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, and 3 laughing emojis. Well, I'm not certainly certain what you're on about, and I'm a bit tired. So, then Shiny Light says, space, yeah, there is some space above us, but not really what you believe. There is a dome and everything below reflects back to us. The moon is an X-ray of our known Earth. But it makes you think, it's like the old conspiracy about, the US actually faking the moon landings to make the Russians look bad. And then the old Stanley Kubrick connection. And there is a fascinating documentary about that. And whether that's true is a whole entire story, but certainly the documentary talks about some of his filming techniques. And some of it does relate to his films, but whether that's a true thing, I don't know. But it'll be quite shocking, isn't it, if it does turn out to be true that the US government actually faked the moon landings because they wanted the US, the Russia or Soviet Union at the time, whatever it was, to spend billions on their space program, and fundamentally the Americans didn't. But of course, we're never going to know the answer to that, because if it is true, it's going to be hidden forever. And but it's a fascinating idea and conspiracy. And I'm a bit like that. Yeah, did we go to the moon or not? But then again, you can certainly look for a telescope, and apparently you can still see the landing craft and the flag if you get a powerful enough telescope. But if it's a hologram and it's not actually fundamentally real, could they project that? And then the old conspiracy about when they tested some nuclear bombs on the moon, and how it rung like a bow, which kind of is saying that actually the moon is a hollow thing. But then again, in science and physics, could we have a hollow planet? And then the old talk about Admiral Byrd, flying over the Antarctic and basically flying into the inner Earth. What's all that about? And I'd love to actually buy the book he wrote about it and read it. I've never read that book. But again, Admiral Byrd and all those expeditions to the Antarctic, that was a fascinating, part of history. And one thing we often forget about World War II is that people always say, well, the Germans invaded, the first country they invaded was Poland. Well, it's not. It wasn't. It was actually the Antarctica. They invaded that first. Or so the conspiracy says. But, and of course, it's funny how there seems to be a lot of censorship around Antarctica as well. And yet, it's, if you go and explore it, there's petrified forests that are still remaining, and all sorts of strange things going on down there. So it does make you think what actually is going on. And because we don't go there, because we don't see it fundamentally with our own eyes, how do we know what's the truth and what's not the truth? But I'd love to know. And then Don Julio says, good evening, sir. So good evening to you, Don, and to everybody. And of course, in the UK, it's just gone 6:20. So it now is evening in the UK, which is a lovely thing. And I can't think of a better way to spend an afternoon with my lovely fans and friends. So I love you guys, and all the ladies, don't forget them as well, to bits. And then Shiny Light says, Earl Grey tea. Well, I like Earl Grey tea. That's what my dad used to have. I had many years, but we used to have it with another tea bag. So we would have one Earl Grey tea bag, and then we have something like Tetley's or Yorkshire tea, and then put them both together in the teapot and make our own little brew. And it adds that little bit of taste to your tea. And I must say, I must get some more Earl Grey tea bags at some point. And then Sam says, "Man, I got to leave, brother, and my daughter is hungry. Soon as I cook the at the back." So you got to go. That's okay, Sam. If you got to go, family will always come first. And then Shiny Light says, "Yes, they said that they've lost the footage of the capers." Well, yeah, it's always funny how sometimes they often lose things, which kind of points to the evidence that they did it, and it's quite funny, that, isn't it? And then Shiny Light says, "Well known, Fat Braggy, they have reached 164 levels below our feet." Well, it's been quite interesting recently with all this talk about that under the pyramids in Egypt, there's a whole entire civilization and world they discovered, and it goes down many, many levels. And that's a recent thing, although I expect they've probably known about it for quite a while. And the reason why it's been coming out in the mainstream media and also on YouTube is because it's just been leaked. But it's funny how you never seen any footage, and nobody's going to explore it because they're keeping that fundamentally secret. Because what are under the pyramids, and what are they fundamentally hiding? And I think that's quite fascinating. But then again, there's lots of places like that guy in Turkey who was digging in the back of his house, and he found a tunnel which led to a whole entire city. And then they say that a lot of these underground cities, which people, it's like it could hold 20,000 people. It was that fast. A lot of them are actually connected from one place to another. And is that because we've gone through times in the past in the world when the Earth has been going through like a Heinrich movement, where the world is resetting itself? So has humanity. We've gone underground to survive, and we've prepared for it. And let's face it, in the modern world, there's probably more bunkers and underground places being built more than ever. And that's certainly true. I mean, you can certainly, if you have the money, go and invest and have a bunker put in your back garden. And there's quite a lot of YouTubers are doing this. I've seen quite a few YouTubers where they go and build a whole entire house or place under their own house and have like escape tunnels and everything. That's fascinating. But certainly, certainly since the Cold War, there's more underground bunkers being built. But what are they building them for? What do they know that we don't know? And like I said, many years ago when I was at school, I had a science teacher called Mr. Sykes. And I can remember this memory so vividly. And I keep meaning to actually go and find my old school books, because I kept everything somewhere in the attic. I've got a box with all my old school books in. But I can remember we was in his class. It was a physics teacher, and somebody asked in the class, are you looking forward to the future? When at this point in time, and Mr. Sykes, and he must have been in his 50s at the time, and said, well, and this is in the 1990s, so 30 years ago. So maybe a little bit older, maybe 35 years ago. You're saying, well, no, actually, I'm not looking forward to the 2020s, because there's a meteorite going to hit the planet and it's going to wipe out a lot of life on Earth. And I can remember that so vividly, that memory. And it's funny how it's always stuck in my mind about him saying, well, when I'm 80 or 85, this meteorite's going to to hit the planet, and they've known about it. It was in all the science magazines, meteorite, found on a course to hit Earth in whatever year, and I can't remember the year. So of course it's not happened yet. Maybe in the next 5 years. It's better in my mind. I'm fairly certain it was at some point in the 2020s. So he was like saying to us, well, no, because if I live to that age, and I'm still around when that meteorite or whatever comet hits the planet, not a lot of people are going to survive. And that is such a vivid memory in my mind. And it's funny how it's stuck in my mind for 35 years for like some purpose. But I'd love to go and actually find my old physics science book and see whether at the time when I was a kid I actually wrote it down, because it was quite profound, and Mr. Sykes was a very good teacher. But let's face it, so let's take the example that that's a true story, and that in the 70s or 80s they discovered a meteorite or an asteroid or whatever it is, and they traced where it's going to go in the path, and it does in the 2020s or 2030s hit the planet. Would they tell you about it? Would the governments of the world let us, the people, know? Well, they wouldn't, would they? Because let's face it, if they turn around tomorrow, next week, and said, you know, oh, in a year's time, an asteroid is going to hit the planet, and 75% of the population is going to die because of it, and we're going to have, you know, no light for quite a few years, a decade of darkness, there'll be no food production, people will just stop working, wouldn't they? There'll be riots, the shops would empty, people would not cooperate, and the world would turn to chaos. And so would they actually tell you? No, they wouldn't, because of the fact that that's such a important thing for them to control. But how come I've got that memory, and how come to this day it doesn't leave my mind that that science teacher told us about it? And you know, if you said to me, you know, oh, what else can you remember from your science classes? I can't remember anything other than that. That's the only thing I can really remember from science. I can't remember anything about, you know, talking about the planets. I can't remember talking about gravity, but I can remember that little conversation we had, and I can all remember thinking at the time, well, how terrible that would be. But of course, memories change and memories adapt, because it's a bit like the old Chinese whispers, which is where, you know, you get 2 people or 10 people. The first person tells, you know, is given a little story. He tells it to the next person, but the next person slightly gets it wrong and changes it. And by the time it's been told, and the 10th person's got that story, it's a completely different story. So is that an element within this whole thing that I can remember? Actually, you know, and I wish I could remember the year. I really do. So, and I keep meaning to go in at it and think to myself, well, you know, did I write it down? Would I, as a child, or I would have been a teenager at the time, so I would have been 13 or 14, would I have remembered and thought it was that important that I would have wrote it down in my science book? And I don't know whether I did or not, and I keep thinking about looking for that book, but I've just never done it. But yeah. And then Leonardo Roller says, Finland, bunker capital of the world. Well, of course, you're on the edge of you know, Russia, so you definitely need your bunkers. And it's amazing how things have changed geopolitically in the last few years since Ukraine. But now what? You know, look at what's happening with America actually yesterday bombing Iran. I mean, that's vastly escalating things, isn't it? And now tomorrow, apparently Iran are going to meet with Putin. So what does that mean for the world? I mean, you know, would Russia actually give Iran a nuclear bomb? Because let's face it, if Russia said, right, we're going to give you a nuclear bomb, well, Israel's going to be gone in the next day, isn't it? Because they would use it against Israel. And already, you know, they're saying that the Iron Dome in Israel is running out of missiles. Which is why, you know, the US is shooting down the drones and the missiles as much as they can, and at no point I reckon the UK will get involved in all that, which we already have been. But yeah, I mean, it's a whole messed up situation, is that. But let's not go too much into the politics of the world of today, because we're far more fascinated with the world of yesterday. But of course, if you're not aware of what's going on in the world, how can we address it and actually try to sort it out? But as an individual, we have no power and no say when it comes to all these things. So we only have the power of our own world and our own thought processes and our own consciousness. So let's project positivity, let's project loving the whole thing of ourselves, and let's just try to move forward in a positive light. And then we got a comment from Offer 10. Hi, Braggy and chat. So wave to you. How are you, Offer 10? Please let us know, guys, how you all are. It's always important that you do leave that in a comment, because I'll read it out, and then you know that you're all right. And then Shiny Light says, these underground units lead everywhere. That's what they say. I mean, you got all these loud booming noises that are being heard, and they speculate, well, it's actually government building underground, you know. making and blowing up tunnels, because I've certainly got the ability to build. You know, just look at World War II and the Germans and the underground factories they built, for instance. You know, so what can we do today is probably even more fast. Then Shiny Light says, "Hi, greetings and glad tidings." And then Opperton says, "Hey, at Shiny Light, skull." And then Shiny Light says, "Skull." Oh yes. I must say, sitting down is aggravating my back at the moment. But it's alright, I can cope. I was doing a job in the garden the other day, and it was a lot of bending over, and it just, it probably just, hopefully, it's just my muscles just aching because they're got a bit stronger. As you always say, you know, when you're doing exercise, you're doing a job, no pain, no gain. I think that's fundamentally true. We've had no thunderstorm. It did try to rain earlier, and I must say the clouds are very overcast at the moment. So, and I said this morning, you know, I thought, oh, it looks like it's going to rain today, I reckon, when I looked out the window. But we'll see. I love it when it rains. I love a good storm. It's always good when, you know, thaw visitors and we get a good thunderstorm. And then Shiny Light says, "I'm tip-top, toppity-toe." But it makes you, I do wonder where that phrase actually comes from. I keep meaning to actually, you know, I could ask Alexa, but I don't know whether Alexa would know. Yeah, I wonder where it comes from. When was it first recorded in a book? What does it fundamentally mean, tip-top, toppity-toe? Is it some Cockney slang? Is it more localised? But even now, I'm saying it now, and it's going to have to appear on a T-shirt in the future because it's going to be a channel phrase. And you know, you're spreading it across the world, Ellie. Everybody start, you know, all our fans all over the place are going to start going, "Oh, tip-top, toppity-toe," you know, in Finnish or in Norwegian or in Iceland. It's a bit like when we used to talk on the channel about "Hey up me duck," and I've always thought, oh, that's quite funny that, because you know, people in the world are going to start using "Hey up me duck," and and that's just a local saying hello, "Hey up me duck," you're all right, you know. But and perhaps you know the answer to this already, Shine Your Light. And then Shine Your Light says, "Are you sure it's because you're sitting down, Braggy?" Oh, well, maybe so, yeah. Perhaps this settee I'm sitting on isn't as comfortable, and I'm probably not laid down enough to give my back a rest. But I didn't get. I've already had a few hours sleep, and then I woke up. But then some days, you know, if I get 2-3 hours sleep, and I think myself, I wake up, and I just know that I'm not going to fall back to sleep easy. I just think, oh, sod it, I want to get up and do something. So sometimes I get my sleep in 2 stages. I'll get a bit of sleep at night time, and then maybe at some point in the day I'll lie down and have a bit more of a snooze for a couple of hours. And then Opperton says, "It's going well here, Braggy. I just got home from the shooting range. Bright sun out and they're hot here today. It's very warm in the UK at the moment. It's cooled down a little bit, but yesterday was too hot, and I don't do well in too hot heat. I mean, I think hot weather is for your holiday, isn't it? Let's face it. If you go on a holiday, you want it to be sunny and hot. But when you're trying to do things, you know, say certainly this week I would have gone out and filmed a bit more, but it's just been too hot. So I'm hoping it's going to cool down, and it's going to be a bit cooler next week, so that when I got the energy, maybe have some better sleep tonight and tomorrow. I'll have a bit more energy to go and start and do some more filming, because I've got more content to film and I've got more ideas. And you know, if you ever got any idea, I've always got little notepads full of ideas. You know, I've got notepads full of things. I do a lot of list writing. Yeah. Yeah, there's all sorts in here. I don't need that. And then when I'm sometimes replying to my comments, I often see good ideas from the comments as well. So I do write them down and think, oh yeah, that's an interesting comment. That comment would make a really good, video. And I do wish we had the ability like TikTok where you could, have the ability to go into the Creator app or maybe on the actual plus sign and actually click on a comment and then record a video from that comment. I think YouTube really need to do that because I think that would be brilliant. Because I do like it. It's a really good way to make content on TikTok, especially when you get some really good comments. And it's also because those videos also come onto YouTube, and then they end up in our questions answered playlist. And there's certainly quite a few from me and Eggle I've not edited yet and published. And then King Edward says, sounds like something from one of the old comedy shows like Only Fools and Horses. And then Shiny Light says, me! Shiny Light says, it's my saying, Braggy. I've not recorded it yet, Braggy. Right, it's definitely your saying. Yeah, you should definitely copyright that. Have it under intellectual property. That'll be a good name for your YouTube channel. Tip top toppity toe. And welcome to the channel. Yeah. It's a bit long for a YouTube name, but then again, I can't really talk about that because look at the Northworthy Sagas and Stories, which is a very long name. And I do often think about just going back, just getting rid of the and stories, or maybe even just going down to Northworthy. And if I really thought about it back in the day, I would have called it Norseworthy. In fact, if you go to our TikTok, that's what I've rebranded it as, Norseworthy instead of Northworthy, because there's also a thing called Noteworthy, and quite a few music channels use that phrase, noteworthy, and there's a big noteworthy TikTok channel. So if I really thought about it and I would have been a bit more clever, I would have gone with Norseworthy and not Northworthy. But again, the reason why TK and I chose it because we're paying homage to the Anglo-Saxon aspect of Derby. And there's a company called Northworthy Guitars that make guitars in Derby, but it's not copyrighted because you can't copyright a name from 1400 years ago. But it's a bit long-winded with the sagas and stories. But then again, if I do that, and I have a channel called Northworthy, just never done nothing with it, and I've got Northworthy AI, where eventually I'm going to start putting the AI content on. I've got another channel called Medieval Mayhem, and I've got quite a lot of channels I've developed which are ready to go fundamentally, so I just need to get the videos ready, but it all takes time, and most of them are going to be AI faceless led content, which I'm working on behind the scenes just to put more content out there. But of course, if you're trying to run more than one channel, it can become a little bit difficult because there's not enough time, and if I start working on too many channels, it's going to have that effect on this channel where it's going to dilute it too much. But if I ever get to the point where I could have a team of people doing it, then I'd have them running quite a few channels. And it's so easy these days just to make faceless AI content. You can knock out 100 videos in a day, really, if you wanted to. Not publish, of course, but to make those videos. But of course, AI gets things wrong, which is why I don't really put any of the AI made content about history, because they all need vetting and it does get things wrong. And there's also the long format AI content I've made from InVideo is a website, and then the other website I use for AI content is a website called Veed, V-E-D. So you create a prompt, and from that prompt it will make you a shorts video. But again, because there's not a lot of B-roll Viking footage, you end up seeing the same blooming Viking footage all the time. And then it will have, medieval knights in a video about Vikings. So again, it gets things wrong. But when you go to the YouTube create thing, and you go to the middle button where you can add little skits and little memes, I do wonder where they come from and how are they actually uploaded to YouTube. Because I do wonder about that. Where did they get all those memes and all those funny images you can have in your videos? Because now and again I do use, if you want to pick, let's say, you want a funny picture of, Peter Griffin, or, you're doing a video about cats and you want a 3-second short video appear about cats in your video doing something daft, or, you want, you got a reason to have a laughing goat in your video. You can just go to that aspect of YouTube Create, and there's a whole vast library of GIFs and moving pictures. But I do wonder, where do they actually come from? Do people actually upload them to YouTube? And I've not so far managed to find that answer. Of course, I never really fundamentally Googled it to find the answer. And then Shiny Light says, waiting for the t-shirt. Well, I did make some more t-shirt designs last night, including a logo where you got Thor, and Thor saying, Thor loves Northworthy. So that's one of the new designs I made. And I made a very good design of the Old Father with Northworthy sagas underneath and a banner. I'm not sure whether I put that on a t-shirt yet. I normally start off with a sticker. And then once you've done the sticker one, it will give you 3 options for having a t-shirt, a hoodie and a mug. So then you go and do the metadata for them, and then they become live. But there's a little button of a market, hang shopping bag at the bottom of the screen. If you click on that, you will see some of the merchandise we've got. Although I'm not getting all of it. So I'm not seeing all of it when it comes to putting that merchandise. So do go and check out our merchandise, because it does really help if you buy something. And if you use the there is a if you type in, if you buy something, if you spend over, I think, $75 or around about £70, if you type in Northworthy 793, you get free shipping. So don't forget that, and check out our merch. And of course, if you wanted something specific, if you wanted, I want a picture of Eggle and I want him to be stood next to, Dave the cat, the Viking cat, and I want him to be saying this or this. If you let me know, say, Bruggy, could you do a design with this element on this catchphrase, then I could make that for you. So I will personalise the merchandise also to fit your needs as well. So do check it out, and it does really help, because we don't make any money from monetization yet, because we're still round about 1,600 hours to get the 4,000 hours, but we are creeping up. Once we get to the 3,000 hour mark, then in theory we should get super chats back, and that'll be helpful, because all this equipment, all of this costs money. £500 for that and £3,000 for this, and if you want to buy another one, it all costs money. But it's not just that, it's also your camera equipment, and it's also having all the equipment you need for filming. And I'd love to learn actually to get a decent SLR camera, one that connects to YouTube instead of using a mobile phone, because I'd imagine that would improve the quality of the live streams. So go back to your comments, just bear with me. So yes, then definitely Shiny Light. If you want to appear in kit and will, and appear on a video, you're more than welcome to. I think me and you sitting down in a live stream or making a few videos, perhaps you could join the vlog series, would be quite interesting. And I'll try not to talk over you. because I got told off for that last night, that I'd talk over people too much. But that was a problem with Eggle when I used to film with Eggle. I didn't always give him a voice, and I don't try to be dominant when it comes to talking, but you know, it's a bad habit I've got. But then again, if you don't speak your mind and you're not heard, you're not going to be heard, are you? And then Opper10 says, I tried shooting with a bow for the first time. Shocking how quickly my arm gets tired. Well, yes, because the amount of strength you need to pull a bow back, and especially the heavier the poundage, and you certainly see it, and I've seen videos where they talk about archers, how they develop their own muscles and muscle memory. That is pretty incredible. It really is. And it is. There's a lot of force goes into pulling a bow. And I do have a modern wooden bow. If I could buy some arrows, and I'm working on picking up some big pieces of timber, some wood, so I can have a couple of. So I'm gonna hopefully, if they're still there and been left in the wild, I can get permission from my friend to take them, which I don't think will be a problem. If I get two of them in the back of my car, perhaps we could have a venture out, Ellie. You can give me a hand, shine your light if you want, and then I can make an axe target, and then we could have another target for throwing javelins at, and I think that would be good. But we could also incorporate archery, but I don't have an authentic longbow. I really do want to get one, but again, everything costs money, and if you're looking for an authentic handmade longbow, you're looking between £500 and £1,000. Even second hand, they're £300 to £500 second hand. And of course, your arrows cost £5 to £10 easily each, and so I just don't have that spare capital to say to myself, yeah, I've got £500 or £1,000 spare. Let's go and buy a bow. So of course, at some point when we have that money, when the channel makes that money, we'll invest it and buy a bow, and then we can bring archery and talk about the medieval longbow. In fact, I had a friend of mine, not seen him for many years, called Dave. He was he was into artillery. In fact, he was a very clever man because he used to make his own cannons, and he used to run a regiment running cannons in the American Civil War Society. And he's got like a little office space, and it looks like a ship's cabin, and all along the sides there's all these artillery shells. Well, hanging up, he's got a bow from the Mary Rose because he knows the director in charge of it, and he swapped it for an artillery shell, which the guy that. So it's got actually a Mary Rose longbow, and I've no idea what's happened to Dave. I assume he's still going probably. But a lovely guy. He was very knowledgeable when it came to guns and so forth. And then Shiny Light says, work your way up slowly, Opper10. No, I'm tired and I can't speak. Yeah, I think that's the thing. And then naturally with archery, once you get used to a low poundage bow, that's when you go up to a bigger size bow, and some of them can be quite big as well, 6 or 7 foot high. And of course, the longer the bow, the more poundage you're going to have, and the more pull. So they are, yeah. And I did a lot of archery in my teenage years when I used to belong to an archery club, and do have a composite bow somewhere in the house. And then Shiny Light says, spell check crept in. Well, yes, I mean, auto spell and all that. Still not got good yet, has it? And Opper10 says, yeah, definitely needs practice, but there it was my first time shooting with a hunting bow. And I've never shot with a crossbow before, apart from I had a hand-old one many years ago, but that's gone now. It wasn't mine, it was somebody left it around my house or down my workshop. But I certainly got, if anybody wants to make a crossbow, I do have patterns for a Anglo-Norman one. The main problem you're going to have is getting the metal bit right, and have it sprung steel so it works and heat treated right, and then you've got to make the main stock. Then we have a comment from D28 Braggy. Where does your love for Vikings come from? Dan from the Abbey. Well, very nice to see you here, Dan. Well, I've always been interested in history. I just love history, and I've always loved it from a very early age. And it's something that my mum and dad encouraged me to get into as a kid. You know, I had lots of toy soldiers and a wooden fort, and whenever we went on holiday, we always went to some military museum because there's literally tons of photographs as a child, me standing next to tanks and aeroplanes, and history is such a fascinating thing because it makes us who we are. We are history. We live and breathe it every day, and it's all around us. It's underneath our feet. It's everywhere we walk, and especially with the Abbey and Derby Abbey and all the Roman history. Which is just fascinating. From if you go in the park, you've got the remains of the Roman road, which is that slight embankment, and it flats off. That's the Roman road element of it. And of course, if you go a bit further along, you got the where they built the first fort. It would have been a wooden fort when they first came to Derby, and then gradually they went and moved over the river to Chester Green. So history is all around us, but I've always had a fascinating for Scandinavian history and Viking history. And I think at a young age I discovered all the Viking history in Derby. And then as a teenager I used to go to the Heritage Centre quite a lot and talk to Richard Felix, and he always had quite a lot of shows and displays, and that was when I first met a Viking reenactor when I was about 11 or 12. I thought that was fascinating. And I can remember at school there some Vikings came and they talked to us about the Vikings, and I thought that was amazing as well. So it's just a fascinating era in history, and of course heritage is so important because it's important to remember where we came from and who we are as human beings, because if we forget that heritage, if we forget the past, we can't learn from it and we can't improve the future, can we, fundamentally so. And of course I also got fascinated with Viking culture because of the faith path I went down. I was always interested in getting away from Christianity and looking and exploring different faiths, and I did try quite a few. I became a druid, I became a white witch, and I learned quite a lot of that from people, but it never quite felt right. And all the time in the back of my mind I was reading about the Norse gods and reading the sagas. And then at the time I was in the Scouts. I then joined the Viking Venture Scout unit in Alistair by chance. I mean, one of the biggest Venture Scout units back in the day, which no longer exists anymore. I believe it's been disbanded, which is a shame, really. And then they also had the Iceni Venture Scouts, which is for the ladies, of course. And of course, it was just a real good way to go and exploring and do a lot of rock climbing and canoeing and caving. I did a lot of caving as a Venture Scout and in my early 20s. And then just one day, when I went to a war game show, because I got into wargaming from about, I was always into toy soldiers, but from about 13, my mum took me down to the Derby war game show, and she said, this is my son Andrew, he's into military things, can he join your club? And they said, yeah, you can come along. And I got taught how to paint figures, I got taught how to, do wargaming and how to be a strategist and how to command figures on the battlefield, which is a really important aspect of leadership as well, because if you can understand leadership of an army on a battle top, you can do it in real life, but also it gives you that element of leadership and understanding about life itself. So then one day I went to a war game show in Sheffield, and I met these American Civil War reenactors, as I often say with my friend Sean, a guy called Sean Devereaux, who was from the War Game Club. He was a short guy with ginger hair, and at one point in my life I had a thing for his sister called Cecilia, but no idea what's happened to Sean, whether he's even alive or not. But I do know at some point he got into medieval reenacting, like the 13th, 14th century. So I joined that, but I was always still fascinated by, Viking culture. In fact, because I did my apprenticeship in sheet metal and as a machinist, I even at one point when I was about 16, 17 made a Viking helmet and a few knives, because it's just one of those. Well, it's what we class in engineering as a foreigner, in the sense of it's a job that doesn't belong in the engineering workshop, and you shouldn't be working on it. But in your spare time, when the boss isn't looking, you'll be working on little projects for yourself, but don't tell the boss that. So that's always been a fascination for me, and I love that aspect of it. And then in 1999, when I was at a multi-period reenactment event, and there's literally 10,000 people taking part, and it was incredible. And you go to the beer tent when there's just thousands of people dressed in all the different kit, and your mind's blown. I bumped into some Vikings from Derby, and then that's when I fundamentally joined the Derby group in 1999. From a guy called Gary, and it was quite nice because he said to me, "Oh, it's really nice to have somebody join the group who's actually a reenactor rather than somebody who's completely new, because we don't have to train you so many things." And of course, after that, it just kind of took off, and we enjoyed the battles. But we went off then. Well, it's always funny around this mark of a live stream. It always disconnects, and of course, as my friend Jim and a lot of people describe reenactment, it's fundamentally a drinking society that in the daytime dresses up in funny clothes and reenacts battles, but fundamentally it's a drinking culture, really. And certainly some of the best drinking occasions in my time is when I've done reenactment, whether it's on a 19th century sailing ship really in the middle of the ocean, or you're at some medieval castle. And of course, if you're going camping and you're doing reenactments at the castle, in the evening the castle becomes yours. You can do what you want, and you can go around. And I don't recommend getting very, very drunk, drinking dozens of bottles of mead and lots of beer, because there's lots of heavy drinking involved, because everybody's got a hip flask. Everybody comes along with half a dozen bottles of wine and 40 cans of beer, and it all gets spread about. But I don't recommend at 2 in the morning going around a medieval castle when you're completely rat-arsed, because let's face it, some of these castles are very high up, and I can definitely remember being in a few castles thinking, oh look, that's about 100-foot drop, and I'm really, really drunk. So yeah, and of course it's a brotherhood and a sisterhood as well, so you create these amazing friends. And then you do different periods of history, and then you get paid to do it. You appear on TV, which I've been on TV a few times. I've been in films. We used to do the Napoleonic period. The Spanish government would actually pay you to go abroad for a week to do battles in Spain, and it was 2 days battling and 5 days sunbathing, and everything was free. Your flight was free, your hotel was free, the booze was free, the food was free. And that still happens today. So it's just a fascinating hobby to have, and it's a really fantastic hobby, because how many times in society do we end up making friends which will be your friends for life? And you can be anything you want in reenactment terms. Whether you want to be a Celtic warrior, whether you want to be a World War II, US infantry, whether you want to do British, because people do German as well, and people have tanks and jeeps, and even to the point where you have World War II planes fly over, and then they simulate bombs being dropped on the ground. And you have to be careful as well, because accidents do happen. And I've certainly seen people having their hands blown off, and I've certainly seen people in the 90s having very bad injuries and having arms blown off, because in those days it wasn't so regulated as it was now. And certainly, I've seen people having broken arms back in the day, because again it wasn't so regulated. So it's all changed. It's become very, very safe, because it's all about training and it's all about safety. Because what we don't want to do as modern reenactors is give reenactment a bad name. But if you just imagine, you go to a town and there's 3,000 of you and there's 5 pubs. So, well, we're going to take over that town. And we've certainly been in situations where you've gone to a small town, that, whether it's a multi-period event or whether it's just with a big society, and you literally take over. And on the first night, and we've done this quite a few times, you drink the whole place dry. Every beer and every whiskey and every bottle of spirits has gone in the first night, because 2,000, 3,000 of you have just invaded the town and gone to every pub, and no matter where you go, you just see people in uniforms, and it's just about having a good time and having a laugh. And it's a really good way to escape the modern world as well, which is another thing about it. It's about escapism. But it's until you try it, until you do it, you don't really appreciate what fun it is. And you're not lived until you're ridden into a battle on top of a Sherman tank. You're not lived until you're being in a battle where there's 45,000 people taking part, and you look down your left flank and it's 3 miles long of infantry, and oh look, 2,000 cavalry had just charged past, and of course it also takes you all over the world, which I have done that. So yeah, it's a fantastic hobby, and I can't recommend it enough, Dan. And then Shiny Light says, greetings, Dan, from the Abbey. And I may be down there tonight. I don't know. I'm waiting for a message from my neighbours, Mick and Maureen. And I did really enjoy it last night. It's a lovely place and lovely locals. And I don't get out enough because I don't have enough friends in my life. So it's always nice to meet really like-minded people. And it's such a lovely pub, is the Abbey, because everybody's so welcoming. And I love that, and I really do appreciate it. So cheers, guys. And I do have a beer in reserve, just in case. But so at some point I got to check my phone and see whether my neighbours, they've gone away for the weekend, because we was going to go down on Friday night when Marie and Martin opened the Abbey. And I'm so glad it opened. And I'll tell you a little story, Dan, if you're still watching. So about 2 weeks ago, my neighbours took me to the Holly Bush on a Saturday night. And, said, well, we want to go to the Holly Bush tonight. And they had a bit of a secret plan. They kind of set me up. So I went along. I did a live stream for that. I finished at 8:30. I went straight over to my neighbours down the bottom of my garden, which is quite big. And so, Maureen drove, and we got to the Abbey, had a very nice pint of landlord. So there we are, in the little cubby hole, if you know the Holly Bush. There's a lovely, lovely pub, it really is. And in walked Martin and Marie. And I thought, oh, hey, what are the chances of this? And of course, I've been set up because Mick and Maureen found out on the Thursday, 2 days beforehand, because Marie told Maureen that they've now taken over the Abbey. And then, so they sat down and said, Andy, he said, we've got some news to tell you. I said, all right, well, what you got to tell me then? Thinking, I don't know what's going on here. I said, we're now the new landlords of the Abbey. And I was like flabbergasted. I was like, you what? It's not often in life you'll find me silent and like going, wow. And then we had a bit of a chat about it to them, and me, Mick and Maureen gave them our worldly advice about running a pub. We certainly know a lot about pubs because we like to go to them. And I got a little bit of experience working in pubs myself over the years. So I've been a barman, and I've also been a cleaner at Wetherspoons. I did try to go to Wetherspoons and be a bar staff, but they don't like older staff working in the bars in Wetherspoons. But they're just crap management. So that was quite a surprise, and I was like, for 5 minutes, quite silent and flabbergasted by the whole thing, and I had to take a few minutes to get it in my head, what they just told me. So I'm one of the first people to know about it. And then I think a couple of days after that, the councillor, what's his name, is it Martin somebody, put it out on Facebook, and I left a really nice comment saying, the pub's in great hands, and I am certain that both Martin and Marie will do a really good pub. Will run a really good pub, but it also adds that community. And my local pub is the Red Cow, but there's no community in the Red Cow. It's so cliquey. Nobody talks to you. And I'm never going to go to the pub where that happens, because I like, same with Woodlands. Woodlands is a little bit cliquey. And of course, when I moved to Alistair, I used to go to the pub at Part Farm pub, of course. That's where I used to regular drink, and I've had lots of really good times in that pub. And it's a damn shame it closed. And that was the day when I used to go out with my brother Stephen, because he used to be a regular in there, and I knew an awful lot of people used to go in the Part Farm pub. It's a shame it closed. I mean, I was there last night when it closed down, and we took all the signs down, and I hope a hand for somebody the landlord said we could have the pub sign, and I hope the guy that had it take it off the wall, and we all had a few souvenirs given to us. But if I do go down tonight, that'll be 3 nights in a row, but we'll see. And I didn't go to bed until 12 o'clock this afternoon, by the time I finished drinking and having a good time, So it was a bit late. So I've not had a lot of sleep, but I don't need a lot of sleep. I can literally a couple hours. I'm wide awake again, and then my head's all buzzing. And then the other night on Friday, I got talking to a very nice guy. Me and Ellie, who Shine You Light, we went down, didn't we? We had a good night that night. You had a lovely dress on. You looked very beautiful, Ellie. And got talking to a lovely guy called Scott, who's invited me to look at his basement in Darnley Abbey because he says he's got Roman remains there, and it's apparently a haunted place. So yes, so hello Dan, welcome to the Northworthy Sagas and Stories. And please do feel free to call me Braggy whenever you see me out. I mean, my real name's Andy, but I don't mind either way. Braggy is just my Viking name because in Viking, it's funny in Viking reenactment we take on a persona of a Viking when we choose our own Viking name, but we don't really do that when it comes to the later periods. You know, in the later periods, because I used to be an NCO, a non-commissioned officer, it was always Sergeant Wright, or it's my surname. Although I had the entitlement to wear the bars on my shoulder, I was never arrogant enough to want to do that. And of course, the more rank you got, the more responsibility you have. So I just remained with the 3 sergeant stripes. I just remained a sergeant for many years. And of course in reenactment terms, and what I don't like and a lot of people don't like, is when you get people self-promoting. So what that fundamentally means, if you go to reenactment and then one week you got a private and the next week he comes along, oh yeah, I got a message, we're going to the pub at 8:30, so I am going to the pub tonight, yay, going to the pub, more beer. So what I mean by self-promoting, you get somebody who's in reenactment and is a little bit arrogant, because you do get people with a bit of a chip on the shoulder. And so one week he comes along as a private, and the next week he goes out and buys himself some corporal stripes and puts them on, and then starts bossing me people around as a corporal. We don't like that, because it should never be self-promoting having rank, because rank means responsibility, and it should be awarded and given. And it should never be self-promoted. And I've definitely seen that so many times when people have self-promoted themselves. And a sign of a good person in rank is somebody that doesn't fundamentally want it. And another good sign of somebody who's got leadership and understands the ranking system is somebody that's quite happy to be promoted, whether it's a corporal, whether it's a sergeant, or whether it's a first sergeant, or whether it's a lieutenant or lieutenant in English, whether it's a captain, but also is quite happy to go back and become a private again, because some people do go down that route. And certainly in some societies, some of the officers, some of the NCOs actually think they are officers and actually have the men and the privates do everything for them. Clean my boots, put my tent up, make my dinner. And I've never done that, because that's not the way I live my life. And it don't matter what you got on your shoulders or on your side of your arms. At the end of the day, you're just another individual who's just portraying a role. And the only reason why you have that on your arm is because you've been given it, and you've been given that responsibility. And it is a very responsible role. Certainly back in the 90s, when I used to be an NCO, and the society was very large, there'd be 1,000 men in the battalion, and I was always given the blooming role of being the one at the left flank or the right flank. So what I mean by that, when you're marching in a battalion and there's 1,000 men, and of course let's not forget the ladies, because lots of ladies also reenact as soldiers and as infantry. The reason why you have a ranking system is so that when you're in a regiment, or whether it's in a battalion, and a battalion is normally made up of a number of regiments. Normally, traditionally, a regiment is made out of 10 companies of 100 men in each. But the reason why you need that ranking system is to keep the men in order, so that when you're marching, you're all straight, and you have your sergeants and your corporals at the end of the ranking system of that body of men, so that when you're walking out, you can look to your left, or in this case your right, and you can look to your left, and you can see where your sergeant is, and you can see where the corporal is. And normally you have some in the central rank, which will keep, because what you don't want is when you're marching for your centre to be either too far forward or too far back, because then you end up with a bow in the formation. So they are there as guides, so that when you look right and you look left, you can see whether you're in line with the sergeants, but I was always given the job of being the officer on the left flank, and there's an awful lot of moving about because when you go into column, so you're going from a rank of 2 into 4, you do a left face and you all move into 4s. Then I have to move back to the other side of the column. I had 1,000 men looking to see where I was, and they're like, right, that's where lieutenant or lieutenant in the American Civil War, White is, that's my surname, and we know that he's in line, and then the rest of the men, the other 1,000, would line yourself up on that. So there's a vast amount of responsibility, and of course we're using guns. And of course we don't fundamentally use bullets. We don't do that. Only when you do live shooting weekend, which is a fantastic thing to do, and it really is pretty incredible and amazing. So we have to be careful, and of course back in the day when we wasn't so careful, and when people could come along to the society and at 15 years old could be put on an artillery piece, and I've certainly seen young kids of that age having bad accidents because what happens with artillery, and you have to you fire it, you have to get a wet sponge and sponge the barrel wet, because what you don't want at the bottom of the cannon is red hot embers, because the next time you put that round down in the next minute it will misfire, and if you're not holding the ramrod right, well, that ramrod's going to explode. And I certainly at one time I saw a very bad injury happen to a very young lad who was about 15 or 16. He didn't have a black powder license, because these were the days when you could get away with it, and he had a splinter from here all the way through his arm because he wasn't instructed how to use a ramrod, because if you don't do it correctly and it fires out your hand, it could cause a lot of injury and not even blow your arm off. And of course that came about and brought more regulation, of course. And I've also seen people where cannons have misfired and the powder has gone out the back and people have been literally being blown backwards. In fact, there's two famous brothers called the Perry brothers. The Perry brothers were the individuals responsible for designing all the Warhammer figures. Well, one of them has got his right arm missing because he had it blown off by a cannon. So again, it's all about training and doing things correct. And again, if we go back to the medieval age, it's so important in that aspect, because we are fundamentally using steel weapons that we have one at hand. And of course they're blunt on purpose, and they're made and designed on purpose to be used in combat. And one of the most common questions I see in our videos is, well, why has your sword not got a point? It's because it's a combat weapon. It has been designed and made so that we can hit each other in a safe and controlled manner. And certainly, if you look at the later medieval period, when you get in a large battle, 1,000, 2,000 people, you can guarantee there's going to be a broken leg somewhere. You can guarantee somebody's going to get whacked and knocked out and made, unconscious by being whacked by an axe or a shield. And certainly within the Viking reenactment scene, we've had at least 1 or 2 deaths from people being killed by a shield boss. When the shield is being thrust forward, it's hit them on the head, and it's just killed them outright. So again, we train and we train and we train to be safe. And certainly you have to also be careful of some of these Eastern European countries, because some of those guys actually use sharp weapons, believe it or not. And then some of, it's not their fault, it's just the way they are. They're a little bit behind the times, but they've got better. But some cultures and countries think it's quite fine to use a sharp sword in a battle reenactment. Well, one blow and you just chop somebody's leg off. And I can give an example of this from the Napoleonic period, when my friend Dave, I talked about earlier, was taking part in a Spanish reenactment, and some guy with a musket you have a ramrod, and you generally ram an empty round down the barrel, and he left his ramrod in his blooming barrel, and he fired his gun, and the ramrod went straight through Dave's leg. But thank the gods, within an hour or half an hour he was in the hospital, and they took the ramrod out of his leg because he was impaled. But again, this happens, and also people have been killed in that sort of reenactment when people who do live shooting with the guns have got one of their rounds mixed up and actually loaded their gun and actually shot somebody. But certainly, you know, no doubt people have been killed by people leaving the ramrod in the barrel, not realising because they're not properly trained enough, and they, you know, you're in a massive battle and the enemy's, you know, 100 yards away and they've fired the ramrod and it's gone through somebody's head, for instance. Not a nice experience, and also not a nice way to die. So certainly through the reenactment history, and I was very lucky to join what we class as the golden age of reenactment, but it really was a wonderful period of time. We've become a lot better and a lot safer, and it's all about practice, practice, practice. And of course, you can't just join a medieval group and be given a sword and go, right, you can go off and fight each other now. You've got to be trained. You've got to start off with a knife and a spear, and you work your way up. But you also have confidence tests, or tests where they will test you to see whether you can pass that test to say, like, yes, this individual is safe with a sword and safe with an axe and safe with a spear. And it's the same with using muskets. We have safety tests. And you know, it's not only a physical test to see whether they can use a musket right, but it's also about testing their knowledge so that they know the correct answers and they know what to do and how to load a gun properly and how not to do it properly. And that is such an important aspect, because what it does, it keeps the hobby safe. And let's face it, you know, there's a lot of drinking involved in the evening, and it's not like the 90s when we used to go to battle, and I've certainly been, in the regiments I used to hang out with, we was notorious at being a drinking regiment, you know, and it was us and the 43rd South Carolinians would be in the pub before the battle, and I can certainly remember a few times thinking, we're in the pub thinking, what's that loud noise? Oh, it's the battle. Oh, we best drink up, lads. We've had 5 pints. Let's go and have a battle, because we don't do that anymore. And that stopped. So you can never drink in the daytime, and you wait until the battle's done. You can always guarantee, as soon as the battle's over, everybody's getting the drinking horns out, or the authentic, you know, tin mug, or you know, pottery mug, and pouring a few beers. And then you all sit around campfires, you sing songs all night, and that is a wonderful, wonderful thing, you know. And it's really is a great and fantastic hobby, and I can't recommend it enough to people. Let's just have a look at your comments. So yeah, so if you've got any more comments or questions, please let me know. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. It's a bit of a different one. I've not put out any shorts today because I thought I'd have a day off from putting shorts videos out. And I need to slow down a little bit on those short videos, just to concentrate on, you know, trying to sort my house out a little bit more, because if I'm concentrating, and because I get so set in my mind about content, and you know, every day I get up and it's the first thing I think about. I'm in bed and I'm thinking about content. I'm brainstorming. If I'm not tired, I'll be on my phone making a thumbnail. I'll be improving a video title. So because I get so narrow-minded and so focused on making content, I often forget the other important aspects of life, which is like, you know, hoovering the floor. And you know, and I really appreciate last night the friend I made, who, you know, and I love the fact that she was so honest and open. I love that. I love strong-minded women who speak their mind, because, and that's such an old thing in society, and such an old thing, and especially in Viking society, because we loved our the women that had strength and wisdom and were not afraid to speak their mind, because that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I think it's a very attractive thing, isn't it, when you have a woman who's, and I don't mean dominant in the sense of being dominant, but very firm and acute to what she says, and also with men as well. I love that as well. But you can be too assertive. So yeah, so I hope you've enjoyed today's long format video. It's a video I made about resilience, because I'm making a number of videos about mental health. It's quite ironic really, because I think I need to watch those videos myself. You know, but yeah, because I just want to get my perspective of what I think about resilience. And that's my latest one, and of course next week I'll film the next one in the series, and I think my next one is going to be a video, because this is mainly addressed for younger men, because that's mostly who our audience is men. It's 91% male and around about 8.8% female. because YouTube is a very male-dominated place, which is why if women who make YouTube content and channels do very well, because of the fact that it's very male-dominated. But I just think it's very important because let's face it, I mean, I'm fairly old, I'm nearly 50. I like to think I've got a bit of wisdom, even though I do daft things, because I can be as daft as a book on a good day. But at the same time, I like to think that I've got a lot of wisdom, so I just want to part some of that wisdom to help the younger adults and the younger men in our society, just to have a voice. So I'm speaking on behalf of them, but giving my wordly advice. So my next video will be about how to make friends, and I think when I've made that video, I think I should probably watch that as well. But I've always been quite harsh when it comes to friendship, because I've always believed, and I always have this belief system, that it's better to have 5 good friends rather than having 25 bad friends. And I've never been afraid in my life to cut out negative people. I just wish people could, practice, and and I've got to do this myself as well, but just be kind and good to each other. Because those are free gifts to the universe and to all of us: kindness and goodness, caring about each other. If we all did this, if we all take those 3 little things and showed love to each other, or 4 things, just imagine how wonderful the world would be. Because we could really make this world a wonderful place if we all, concentrated on being kind and good. And I can't stress that enough, really, in my videos, which is partly what the channel is about. It's about creating positivity, but also about honouring the gods as well. Because in the modern world, I can't, as a modern Norse Viking, go and say, well, let's go and raise 1,000 men and we'll build, 20 longships and let's go and raid Ireland, or let's go and, raid France. And I know for definite that people would do that. If somebody got together and said, right, here's £1 million, we're going to build 50 longships, who's up for going and raiding a country? And of course, the various navies of the world would stop us, but people would do that because people have such an urge and wanting to relive the past. And of course, Norse paganism is such a fast-growing thing because people are connecting again, and they're connecting with their past, and I find that also to be so important, to connect with your past, to remember who we are and where we came from, because we all have this mixed DNA from all these different countries where we come from in the world, and it's important that we remember that. But it's also important to remember that the most important aspect of life is now, because now is the moment of power. And what I mean by that, the decisions you make now will affect what happens tomorrow. So just do it in a positive light. Just let's all be kind to each other, and and that's what I like about the Abbey pub, is because it's got that community. It's got that. You don't often get that in pubs, but yeah, it's great. And I'll be down there tonight again. And I promise, unlike last night, I won't sing any songs. Which is a little bit random, and I do get a little bit embarrassed about singing in public. I don't get embarrassed about doing it in re-enactment terms, because you're surrounded by, 200-300 crazy people that dress up in re-enactment. But when you're doing it in like a modern world, and I really would love somebody to teach me how to play the guitar. I really would. If anybody from Derby watches this and says, "Oh, I know how to play the guitar," I'll teach you, Braggy. I would really love that, because I got guitars, I got bass guitars, I got lead guitars, I've got an acoustic guitar, which needs some new workings so I can tune it up. But because I've tried to teach myself, but I've just never really been successful with doing it. And I've got a good voice, and I think, I love to sing. It's such a wonderful and old thing in spirit, isn't it? Singing. But they do say what came first, speaking or singing. I think probably speaking came first. When we started grunting at each other, when we was cavemen, and we learnt the ability to talk. And I think then after that, we also learnt the ability to sing as well. But yeah, so I do hope you've enjoyed this live stream. Like I said, do check out our merch, and also you can always look on the description. You can always donate money to the channel, and if you are a content creator, please don't forget that donations fundamentally are tax-free. You should separate them from your income, and then when you do fill in your tax returns, and make sure that the tax office know that that's a donation and therefore it is not taxable. And let's face it, I've done live streams, and I've been filming for many years. People have sent me £5. I've had £200-300 sent to me. Somebody sent me £500 a few times to fund equipment. So, and of course, that's tax-free, and it always should be. But it's amazing what the tax office won't tell you. But of course, we have to take the power for ourselves and not let them take the power. And of course, technically, under common law, tax is voluntary anyway. And it's quite interesting because I've been watching those videos from, again, I can't remember his name, when when you're born, you have a trust fund created by the government. There's a famous YouTuber. He's a part-time actor, and he made a number of videos where he demonstrated how, because when you're born, you have this trust fund under your birth certificate. It's called the Keskasei Far, and what you can do with your bills and your council tax, and you have to do it in blue pen. You can basically instruct the council and instruct the the energy companies or any sort of bill to be paid out of that, because it's all in your name, but you're not allowed to collect it because you only have your first 7 years of your life. And this YouTuber demonstrated doing this, and then months went past, and then that's been paid out of his inherited trust fund as it's not like inherited from your family, it's money that the government put in your name. And that's a whole entire subject. Well, that's quite fascinating. But I don't know whether I'd be brave enough to do that myself and get my council tax bill. And you got to use the precise lettering, and you got to use the precise colour ink, because different colour ink means different things in legal terms. For instance, if you're a carer or you may be a support worker, you have to write in black ink because that's the legal requirement. So red ink is naturally what they use if you get a judgment from a judge. If you get anything from a judge, it should be the signature should be in wet ink, and it should be in red because that's the legal requirement. And if you get in a photocopy of, let's say, a repossession order, if you've been shown that, then that's illegal. Then they have no right to come in your property. And if you want to discover a little bit more about that, I would urge you to check out a channel called Bannerman, who goes around and films when people have had their houses taken off them because they argued that their mortgage is illegal, which it fundamentally is under law, under common law, and then the bank they stopped paying it because they've objected to the bank, and of course the bank has no power over you because it's an illegal forced contract. So what happens, you see, the bank tries to take over that property, and they sometimes repossess the property. But then what happens is the people, us, get together, and this is what Bannerman shows in his videos, how the very fact that the people repossess the house back from the bank, and then the bank has no say at all. But it's a sort of complicated subject. I don't understand it all, and I do recommend his channel. It's quite interesting. He also does a number of videos where you get ceremonial coins like £5 coin and a £20 coin, and I think you get £50 coins, and he goes to a petrol station, he'll put £40 of fuel in, and then he goes and pays with these ceremonial coins. But they're legal tender under the system, and large corporations or even private businesses cannot actually refuse to take them. And quite often you see people like Morrison's and petrol stations that do take them, and what he does, he hands them over to them, and as soon as that individual behind the counter picks up the coin or handles the coin, that's accepting payment. So again, those videos are quite fascinating, and I don't mind trying it myself to see whether it fundamentally works. But of course, you have to go and buy some, and they're not fundamentally, they're legal tender, but they're just ceremonial celebration coins. That's quite fascinating as well. There's so many things on YouTube fascinating, there really is. So yeah. So any more comments before I go and do some tidying up and I get ready to go out again for the third night in a row? Oh, 3 nights, and of course 3 is a magical number, and 3 happens so many times in the folk tales I've told. When you're telling a folk tale, and there'll be it'd be like a farmer and he's got 3 daughters, or it'll be 3 animals, or 3 so many times appear in old folk tales. It always amazes me. And of course 3 times 3 is 9, and 9 is a magical number to the Norse. So yeah, so I hope you've enjoyed this live stream. I am going to go in the next second because I'm not really getting any more comments. I don't know anybody. I already got 3 people watching, but thank you for watching this live stream, and of course, thank you for being part of the channel. Because as I often say to people, it's not just my channel; it's your channel as well. Because you're the Northworthy family, and no matter where we are in the world, we're going to have these amazing adventures. We've only just started on this channel. Even though it's coming up to 8 years, this is still at the very beginning of the journey, and we're going to do amazing things. And I intend to take you to amazing countries, and take you to amazing museums, and show you amazing things on the channel. Go to re-enactments and film history, and actually concentrate on making some really big, what you class hero content, which is content which I'm going to really concentrate on and really make some big content in the future. But until we meet again, I just want to say I love you guys to bits from the bottom of my heart, and I hope you can tell, because I'm a very genuine and down-to-earth individual. And and another successful live stream, and I do regret so many times now that I'm not live stream on a regular basis over the past. So let's keep this going, and all being well, I'll be back on tomorrow night at some point. Maybe around about 6 o'clock. It may be a little bit later. It depends. I need to do some more filming. I've got quite a few videos I need to get in the bag and get filmed, so that they're on my PC for editing. And I did edit quite a few videos last night, which is good because it's all progress. And of course, it all takes time. I mean, I could spend on a 30-second video. I could spend an hour on that on a good day. I spent longer than that. So if you've got to edit a 30-minute or 8-minute or 15-minute video, it does take time, especially if I've got to go through the old video and watch it, because I'm trying to cut out the bullshit. Not that it's bullshit, but I'm trying to cut out the stuff we don't need in those videos. And of course, I'm constantly trying to also work on improving my hook at the beginning of the videos, but that's such a niche and such an art form, which I'm still learning after 8 years, although fundamentally I've been making content for 12 years, and I've literally made, probably over 10,000 videos, which is, in my mind, pretty incredible. And if you said to me 10, 15 years back, oh, one day you're going to be appear on YouTube on a regular basis, I never would have believed you. But also, content creation also gives you that amazing ability to have confidence. Let's face it. If you're quite happy to talk on camera, then that gives you a lot of confidence. It really does, and it certainly helped me as well in life. And it's been an amazing journey so far. But as I often say, the journey is still beginning, and we're still going to do amazing things. And I've got so many things planned. It's just, I just got to concentrate on sorting my life out a bit more and getting a bit more organised. Because I can be my own enemy some days, and I've got to think about the old relationship thing. I kind of concluded today that I'm single, and I'm just gonna finish it with my girlfriend, because I just got to the point where how can you be in a relationship with somebody when they don't talk to you? I mean, how does that work? It doesn't, does it? And I think, as Shiny Light says, I got to be truthful to myself, and not something I like to talk about on camera, because my girlfriend doesn't want me to talk about this situation, or ex-girlfriend. I don't know. But how can how can you be in a relationship with somebody when they don't fundamentally talk to you very often? And fair enough, I'll probably be my own worst enemy in that situation, but it's the frustration of being in that situation in the first place. But I've tried and I've done everything in my power, and then I'm just seeing where we're opening up a new chapter in my life, which is wonderful. So of course I still want to have children in my life, but I'm getting old. I better bloody hurry up, as some of my friends and the nearest and dearest told me. Not that I've tried. I'm sure one day I may just do a whole video on this whole subject and just open it all up, because and just tell you the whole story. But if I tell you the whole story of the last, let's say 7 years, it's quite a shocking story. But then again, also I'm quite privileged in the sense of I've not grown up in a bad family, at least not with my parents anyway. I mean, I got siblings, but most of them I don't speak to, and and there's only two siblings that I still care for. My two brothers on my mum's side. Everyone's just not nice people, and I still love them, and that's the crazy thing about it. And I wish them well, but I just don't want nothing to do with narcissistic, not very nice people. And I hate to be a narcissist myself, and I pretty hope I'm not. Because I'm too often in my life I put other people first, and I not always put myself first. And some days, you got to, help yourself before you can help others. Because I've always lived my life wanting to help people, to give that wisdom. And I can still remember, quite a few, no, not many occasions, but occasions in my life when I've seen somebody upset or I've seen somebody in distress. Like one time when I was down the Abbey, I was drinking with a load of friends on the field, and I saw a young woman. She was standing by the wall and she was crying, and I can so visualise it in my mind that I didn't do nothing. I didn't go over and say, "Are you all right?" And I regret that, because that was somebody that was suffering and hurting, and I didn't do nothing. But then there's another occasion a couple of years ago when I was driving just past. No, I'm going on a little bit. I was just driving down to the Meadow Langley estate, because I know Godfrey Meadow very well. He's been a good friend of mine and a friend of my family for many years, and one of the most decent and loving and caring landowners I've ever met in my life. The Meadows are, they're in a different time scale to us because of the wealth and the land they have. Not that they're fundamentally wealthy, they're not. They got land, they're wealthy, but they don't have a lot of money in the bank, I don't imagine. And I was driving there and I saw this guy who was looking like he was in a distressed situation, sitting practically on the edge of the road. And I saw him and I thought, well, and I drove past and I thought, something going on there, something's not right. And I had this massive signal in my mind, everything kind of lightened up, and I thought, well, I should have stopped. And then about an hour later, I drove past him, and there was an ambulance sitting by him, and I thought to myself, yeah, well, at least he's got hope, but I should have stopped. I should have been a decent human being, and I just didn't think at that very moment in the time. And so again, that's another moment when I regretted it. But then last year, when I had another episode like this, and I'll tell you this story. So I was doing some dumpster diving at Park Farm, and I thought, well, I'm going to have a look at the bins, see what, I found a few nice books and a few nice things. And I was driving back home, and it would be about 4 in the morning, because I often do it early in the morning, and sitting at a bus stop was this young lad. And I thought to myself, well, he looks a bit distressed. Why is somebody sitting at a bus stop at 4 in the morning? And he had his head in his hands and his knees like that, which is normally a sign of distress. So I drove up and I turned round and I parked up opposite the bus stop, opened a window, and I said, "Are you alright, mate?" And he said, "No." So I've had a real shit horrible day. So I stopped my car, and for about half an hour I sat with him, and he was only a young lad, about 18 or 19 years old. He'd been having trouble in his relationship and at work, and I sat with him and I spoke to him, and I just gave him a bit of wisdom, a bit of comfort, because I do care, I really do, and I'm really glad I did that. But like I said, there's been moments in my life when I've seen people in distress, and I kind of just made my mind up now that if I'm in that situation again, I'm going to say something. I'm going to put my hand up and say, well, I'm going to go over and ask if they're all right. And of course, sometimes people don't want help. People don't want you to talk to them, and that's fair enough. But a lot of time, when somebody's upset, they're crying, or they're in a distressed situation, they just want a bit of comfort. They want somebody to talk to. And certainly in my past, I've talked to random strangers when I've been stressed, and that does really help as well. Yeah. So if you see somebody in distress, it's fundamentally, and this is not the end of this video, do go and help them. Do take your time. Let's make the world a better place. And as the wise words of Egil Thorson, our late and great channel host, who we are remembering on the channel and keeping his memory going, because how many people actually do that for somebody that's passed and they love? Not many people keep the memory going, which is another aspect of this channel, is to keep Egil or Simon's memory going for as long as possible. And we'll keep him alive in memory and keep his legacy going, because he really was loved on the channel. and I really do miss him. And I know he's often around me. Yeah. So cheers. Thank you for enjoying and being in this live stream. And of course, the more we live stream, the more we're going to get more popular on YouTube. The more people will watch, the more interaction we'll have. And until we meet again, onwards and upwards, and let's make the world a better place. It's goodbye from Braggy. Now I've got to figure out how to end the live stream now. It only takes about 30 seconds to end the live stream. Then you always see my thumb as well. So until tomorrow night, we'll see you again. Oh, tomorrow I'll get I did that unboxing video yesterday for 10,000 celebration. Oh, just before I go, I'll just tell you what I got tomorrow. So I've got a bit of a review and a more in-depth look at the Romano-British sword. So tomorrow that'll be out at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And maybe, to get me act together, I may publish some more shorts videos. But I can't download them from my phone, from YouTube to my phone. I don't know why, there seems to be a problem, because the videos aren't showing up properly. This has been a bit of a hindrance, because normally I make short videos, or upload them to YouTube, and when I want to use them, I just download them to my phone, but I can't do that at the moment. It's frustrating. Anyway, I'm going now, I am going, so goodbye. Thanks for hanging in the live stream.